Sword of Coming Chapter 11-13. The sword worship platform on Luopa Mountain in Beipingzu, the peaks of Qingping Sword Sect in Tonggishao, plus he Xiangting and Yu Qingzhang in Luxiazu where he and Yu apprenticed. If you add the young girls who were taken away from the Great Wall of Sword Qi earlier by Xianxia, the Sword Fairy. Life is involuntary. The east, west, north and south are like duckweeds. 9 sword cultivator embryos who left the Great Wall of Sword Qi with Qin Pingon, Master Chao, whose alias was Chao Mo, at the time, took them out of the broken cave in the Jade Hairpin, and met them on a small boat on the sea. Only Bai Xian and Nalan Yuji is in the Dongfu realm, now Bai Xian is in the Longmen realm, and King Sun Chun, who is the most diligent in sword practice and the most determined in mind, is also in the sea watching realm. After all, it is still a short period of time since I came to Hauran, and nearly half of the children have not entered the 5th level of middle school. For example, there are Yao Xiaoyan, who has the most number of flying swords in her life, and Yu Qingzhang, whose flying sword is named Dajuaniang, is ranked as the 2nd highest rank in the Summer Palace. On the contrary, he Xiangting, who likes to read, turned on the lamp to read at night during the heavy rain, repeatedly reading Swordsmanship Jingjing and several local chronicles. Up Master Yu jumped up. Qin Pingon asked with a smile. He Xiangting, I heard from Qing Chaolu that you actually want to learn boxing? He Xiangting blushed slightly. By Xian Yu Shehui He Gu they also want to learn boxing from Master Chao. Qin Pingon said, if Bai Xian knew you were a girl he wouldn't be so out of tune when he usually speaks. He Xiangting's face flushed. It turns out that she has been pretending to be a boy for the past few years, and she has been able to fool Bai Xian and Yu Shehui, but of course she cannot fool the young hermit. Qin Ping hesitated for a moment, thought carefully and then smiled and said, I know that the 9 of you in the eyes of me Yu Tui Zhongzhu Zhou Chief and our so-called seniors, your sword practice qualifications and future achievements ranking? He Xiangting was actually the one who had the least confidence in himself. After all, Bai Xian and King Sun Chun, whom Bai Xian nicknamed Dead Fish Eyes, their aptitude can be seen at a glance. If evaluated in the terms of Hauran antiques, it belongs to opening the door. Of the other 7 of them, Yao Xiaoyan has 3 natal flying swords. He Gu and Yu Shehui each have their own strengths. In short, he Xiangting feels that he is too ordinary. Even for a long time, the little girl felt that the reason why she was let out of the Great Wall of Sword Qi by the young hermit was due to the military exploits accumulated by her family and preachers. Just luck. First release, well, it was because of the shadow of the ancestors that he was appointed as an official. But because he had just broken through and entered the 5th middle class, he Xiangting had a little more confidence. After all, whether a sword cultivator has the heart or not, in the end, the level of the realm and the speed of breaking through the realm have the final say. Yu Qingzhang looked sad and said, no matter what other people's rankings are, I must be at the bottom. Qin Pingon shook his head and smiled and said, Yu Qingzhang, do you know that your flying sword is named De Duanyang? That day, May 15th, is the old Duanyang festival. I later conceived the natal flying sword and it was also at noon on this day. Qin Pingon said, in the past the priests of our Sword Qi Great Wall would hold sacrificial ceremonies on this day, but that is the old calendar. In fact, this is the same as the customs of the ancient Shu region of Aquarius Island. At first, May 15th was regarded as the Duanyang festival, not the current Duanwu May 5th. Luopa Mountain belongs to the ancient Shu mountains and rivers in a broad sense. So I guess you will still be an ancient Shu for the key points of cultivation and opportunities for enlightenment in the future. I didn't tell you about this before. I was afraid that you would have a rebellious mentality. Just because I told you, I knew it was so, but it was not so. Of course it doesn't matter now. 9 children, you 2 are the most alienated from me on the surface. You haven't said a word or two. From Hai to Tonggishao to Aquarius Island, you gave me a face all the way. It's nothing. There are calculations, there are small calculations, so I often tell myself who will be the closest to me in the future. Maybe it will be the negation of you. Not only the Feijian name Dajuaniang but even your name Qingzhang is also particular. To tell you the truth, your master Yu is shameless and being an enshrinement is not enough, so he insists on interfering to get you out of Luoluo Mountain. Taking it away disrupted many long-term plans of Tui Zhongzhu and me. He Xiangting blushed and Yu Qingzhang felt strange. He always felt that Mr. Yingguan at this moment was very human and a living person. The last time it was still a small boat floating in the sea, that Master Chao who was sitting alone on the bow and eating a bowl of rice with his back to them. An old sword cultivator was scolded several times in the house. Puha scolded him as a trash. Situjiu also scolded him for having no military exploits. Going to the Great Wall of Sword Chi was just a waste of time. Even that drink was too high. The drunk fairy song scolded him. How could he have the face to go to Luapa Mountain to abduct the two children? The old sword cultivator wanted to come out to take a breath, and accompanied the two disciples to chat with the Lord Yinguan. But the old man only stepped out of the threshold with one foot, and heard Xianxia's complaint again. The old man Xianxia had no choice but to take back that foot, and turned back to the lobby, resolutely not going outside to make trouble. Qin Pingon said these long-suffering words, feeling refreshed, held up the vermilion wine gourd, took a sip of the wine, smiled and said, Sect Master Xi's sleeves are tormenting people's hearts. King Chun and Empress Bai Xian, it was Yu Qingzhong who persisted the longest. Later when Miyu saw you he observed secretly for a long time and he also felt that Yu Qingzhong can be ranked third overall. Yu Qingzhong couldn't believe it. Ranking so high? Isn't it a surprise? I can't help but ask myself, so I'm so strong? Qin Ping smiled and helped to express his confusion, and then gave his own evaluation. I also think that Yu Qingzhong has good qualifications, a good heart and full of resilience. Just because their hometown is in the Great Wall of Sword Chi, almost every generation of younger sword cultivators will feel that they are not very good. In history, veritable strong men have emerged in large numbers, and there are so many genuine geniuses that many geniuses dare not consider themselves geniuses. Qin Pingon shook the flagon in his hand, squinted his eyes and smiled. It's like some kind of wine with great stamina. Yu Qingzhong was speechless. Qin Ping said with a smile. But we can't, of course we don't want to see to death your future achievements. He Xiangting, she is now at a higher level than you. Because it is also reading, He Xiangting was able to read every book from thick to thin, but Yu Qingzhong, who also likes to read books, is not good at it. He Xiangting has read a lot of truths in his heart from the book and she began to recognize Haoran Tianxia in a limited way, but Yu Qingzhong still in doubt the truth of the book and the morals outside the book, maybe except for the occasional one or two or three things. Deep in my heart I always reject everything except the Great Wall of Sword Chi. He Xiangting said shyly, Master Chow, is my way of reading really that good? Qin Pingon smiled and said, I am a close disciple of the literary sage lineage, or a gentleman appointed by the Zhongtu Confucian Temple. Would I talk nonsense about studying? Yu Qingzhong was silent for a moment, rubbed his cheeks vigorously with both hands and said softly, I remember uncle and my swordsman preacher before the battle out of the city. They all admired and appreciated Master Chow very much. The shopkeeper is the kind of outlander who is willing to look at the Great Wall of Sword Chi with sincerity. A man who would feel sorry for Ning Yao Xiangzhong is not a sword cultivator. He Xiangting's grandfather also had a similar opinion. Afterwards, several of their sword cultivators violated the strict military order issued by Feijian in the Summer Palace, and they went out of the city to fight without authorization. On the top of the city there is no sword repairer to rescue him. Qin Ping just kept silent and didn't comment, and didn't tell the two children in detail what was right and wrong here. On the road of growth, the person who untied the bell needs to untie the bell, who needs to untie the knot by himself. Yu Qingzhong and He Xiangting were taken out of their hometown by Master Chow, the culprit. The two children traveled together in foreign lands, and they actually began to gradually understand what the young hermit officials did back then. The problem was that when they began to understand the decision of the Summer Palace, they felt even more uncomfortable. Maybe things are so weird. Only when you know right and wrong can you care. I remember that the big white goose once said something that they didn't understand. People who don't distinguish between black and white, and those who only decide right or wrong based on interests, only deal with things not themselves. In addition to teaching swordsmanship, Master Yu would tell them about the local customs and customs during his travels. But as a master he almost never reasoned with them. Only once when he arrived at Luxiazu he deliberately used plain words. His tone seemed to be off topic. If the same thing is done by different people, well, it may not be right. But not necessarily wrong. He Xiangting said, Master Chow, we will often return to Luapa Mountain in the future. Yu Qingzhong hummed. Qin Pingon said with a smile. On the side of Liuxia continent, you must also practice hard and break through steadily. In the future Master Chow will hold your thighs. In the vast mountains and rivers of the 3 continents to the west, you can walk the rivers and lakes under a hidden alias. You only need to report Shangyu Sword Xian He Jian with the title of Immortal. You can settle things without using your hands. Yu Qingzhang grinned and said, I can't do it for the time being, you can report the name of our master first. Xianxia gave a blank look. Which pot was not opened and which pot was lifted? The master and the old man were about to be scolded in the lobby. Qin Ping joked with a smile. I remember that before becoming a sword fairy, no matter whether you were alone or with friends to go out to practice outside Wuxia, if you met an old guy who didn't have long eyes and a high level, who dare not take you if your masters take it seriously, you just say that you have an anonymous little master named Qin Mingping. Let them weigh it. Xianxia blinked his eyes. Master Chow, will it be more effective to name Sister Ning and pretend that she is our little master? Qin Ping's gold-lettered signboard sighed. In Haoran Xianxia, Jiuzhou Mountains and Rivers, my name is definitely enough. Ningyao walked out of the lobby and sat next to Xianxia. Are you okay? Qin Pingon put away the wine gourd with lightning speed and said vigorously, I didn't drink too much, this little wine drizzle. Xianxia, who was caught upright, hurriedly called the uninterested Yu Qingzhang, got up, said goodbye and left. They crossed the threshold together and turned their heads to look at the steps outside the door at the same time. It happened that Qin Pingon was also turning his head to look at them. Qin Ping said with a smile, Your master's wine tastes very good, please help to block the wine. That Situ Jianxian is pretending to be drunk. I know exactly how much he can drink. He is pretending to be drunk and really swearing. A certain sword fairy from the bowtie's nest in the room said that he was really drunk. Don't blame him for speaking badly, and tried his best to persuade others to drink and immediately lay back when he heard this. Qin Pingon had gone to Jinwu Mountain before, and at the foot of the mountain he met Huan Shu, who was in charge of the lamp of the Patriarch Hall. His seniority was very high and he turned out to be the master uncle of the mountain lord Yueting. This means that Huan Shu is either the younger brother of the founder of Jinwu Mountain in Beipingzu, or the ancestral family of the Zhongtu military family assigned to a certain martial arts temple in Beipingzu to accompany the sages. In short, if Huan Shu is really willing to take care of things, he can take care of not only the internal affairs of Jinwu Mountain, but also Fengshua Temple. In the Longji Mountain belonging to Jinwu Mountain, 30% of the sword sharpening stones that have not yet been excavated can be donated to Luopa Mountain. Jinwu Mountain has made 3 requests, one of which is related to the flying city of Wuxia Tianxia. Ning Yao nodded and agreed, it's a small thing. It's a good thing. The covenant on the mountain is much more reliable than the love oath between men and women in the city. Qin Pingon asked, has Qin Ji thought about when to leave the mountain? Ning Yao said, still watching. A person's sudden wealth often depends on fate and luck, because the ancestors have accumulated negative virtues, and with the shadow of the ancestors paving the way, the descendants of future generations will seem to have had great luck and make a fortune. A family or sect has a long stream of water and it is steady and steady, which makes it even more powerful. Ning Yao said, since the banquet is held on the 5th day of May, I will try to come here 2 or 3 days in advance, and come here at the beginning of May. Qin Pingon subconsciously scratched his face like a millet grain, no matter how you all guessed it right. Am I the fool? Ning Yao asked with a smile. Do you want me to be a bridesmaid for Credit Moon? Qin Ping nodded quickly and said, need must. There were 2 relatively young Earth Immortal sword cultivators, Yan Hodao and Tian Xian. They walked out of the lobby hand in hand, and said that they wanted to be guest ministers of the Qingping sword sect in Tongyi's Hao. Of course, Qin Pingon would not refuse, and there was no need to say hello to Cui Dongshan. It took effect immediately, and the 2 of them were already the guests of the next emperor. Looking back, you only need to go through the process at the Patriarch Hall of Qingping Peak, and ask the head law Cui Wei to spread out the golden jade genealogy booklet and record your name on it. The students carried small hoes to dig the corners of the upper sect, but the husband offered to send talents to the next sect instead. Because the big white goose has become the master of the next sect, it seems that things are not authentic, it is too much, and there is a lot of resentment on Luluo Mountain. The little boy in Tsingyi risked his life to remind the master of the mountain, we must guard against thieves and theft. Qin Shanju suddenly realized at that time that he had to take it seriously, and asked Qin Lingjun if he would dare to speak up for the next time the 2 sects gathered in the Patriarch Hall of Jisa Peak to discuss matters. At that time, Qin Lingjun had just dragged old Immortal Jing and the others to drink a solid morning wine. They were full of courage and they patted their chests to assure that there would be no problem. It was time for someone to step forward and pour cold water on that big white goose. Tian Xian is the woman Jean Dan who openly confronted Wang Jia earlier. She dared to ask Ning Yao, "Ning Zhenxian, can I have a word with you?" Ning Yao couldn't laugh or cry. What kind of approach is this? But she still asked, "What do you want to talk about?" Tianxian is also straightforward. "My head is buzzing and blank. Ning Zhenxian, let me slow down first." Before going out, she had secretly taken 2 gulps of wine, but she still didn't have enough courage. She used the wine to strengthen her courage, and spent it on discussing serious matters with the young hermit official. When it came to Ning Yao, it was not enough. Ning Yao had nothing to say. "You are from the Dragon King Hall in Ruiqing, right? I heard that your ancestor went to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and there was a private residence of a sword fairy outside the city. He has a good relationship with Lu Ji." Tianxian was in high spirits, blushing. "I am a sword cultivator from the Fanji Princess Temple in Ruiqing, the ancestor of Hongzhu." Ning Yao nodded. Qin Pingon explained to Ning Yao a few words about the origin of the murals in the Dragon King Hall in Ruiqing and Princess Fanji Temple. Tianxian was very excited. This time he went out and made a fortune. Not only did he meet Qin Yingguan, he also chatted with Ning Yao, a 14th-level swordsman. In Ruiqing, Tianxian, who was known as the Patriarch's Hall for her clear thinking, felt that she hadn't been hit by the Su Jun Wangjia's spell before, as if she was sorry for the encounter. Then there was a nascent soul realm sword cultivator named Hua Qinggong, who was also a female sword fairy who was rampant in the western 3 continents of Hauran. She wanted to go to the Dragon Elephant Sword sect of Qi Tingji in Namba Sa continent to be a guest minister. Named offerings. Of course, I dare not expect extravagantly for offerings, especially those with higher rankings. As a rule, seats in the Patriarch Hall are required. On the other hand, the standard and salary of the registered guest ministers are not as high as those of the enshrinement. Generally speaking, the more the better. Of course, Old Sword Immortal Qi's youthful appearance and outstanding function are also one of the reasons. Qin Pingon nodded and said, "I will help deliver the message." Hua Qinggong said politely, "It doesn't matter if it succeeds or not. To be honest, in front of a young hermit official, it is already inappropriate to say that he is going to be a guest minister of another kendo sect. It's just that his family has a branch with a hall name in Nambaswazu, and established a sect on the mountain that can barely be regarded as second-rate. With the identity of the guest minister of the Dragon Elephant Sword sect, he can take care of him even more. No matter how pure a sword cultivator is and how free he is physically and mentally compared to others, he is still a person involved in the world of mortals." Qin Ping said with a smile. "If it is said that it is an offering, I dare not guarantee it. It is just that I am a guest and Qi Lao Sword Immortal will still give me this little face." Damn it, Sect Master Qi cut off so many returning home private swords hidden everywhere in the wilderness. If you don't even give this little face, then don't blame me for going to the Dragon Elephant Sword sect to learn from you. The 3 of Chao Gun walked out of the lobby smelling of alcohol and sat down on the steps. Ning Yao occupied one side and they had to squeeze into the other side of Mr. Yingguan. At that time, Song Gaoyuan really couldn't stand it anymore. How can you have such flattering swordsmen? Really don't want the slightest bit of shame, so he pushed Chao Gun away with a shoulder and sat down first near the water tower, just like Na Liuyuan, deputy head of the academy. Xian Dust Tone, Song Gaoyuan said with a smile. "Master Yingguan has worked hard. When will you come to our Antler Palace as a guest?" Qin Pingon asked with a smile. "Forget it, this time money is tight and I didn't bring any gifts. By the way, why haven't you 3 parties formed an alliance yet? Fuyazu Antler Palace, Jinjiazu Ethereal School and Luxiaza Fangkunzong. The 3 parties have yet to conclude an alliance with each other. In terms of unfamiliarity before, the relationship on the mountain is average, but there are 3 life-saving friendships of Chao Gun, plus 3 sects in the course of that battle. It can be said that they have tried their best." Chao Gun explained with a smile. "It is enough for the 3 sects to accumulate military exploits. They have been busy preparing for the establishment of the next sect in the past few years, but there is not much movement. The respective ancestor halls are not willing to make a big splash on this kind of thing. Our Fengzuan sect next election on the side of Fuyao continent, Liuxia continent is chosen by the ethereal sect where Scrofulariaceae belongs to, and Jinjia continent is chosen by the next sect of Antler Palace. At that time the next sect will form an alliance." Qin Pingon nodded with a smile and said, "The time-honored sect is prudent in doing things." Qin Ping suddenly gasped. "Who is in the Antler Palace, where Scrofulariaceae belongs to the ethereal school of Fangkunzong?" Song Gaoyuan breathed out his nostrils, snorted coldly and said with a smile, I don't deserve a name. Qin Pingon said mysteriously, Chao Gun Scrofulary, you two don't know something. When you first entered the Summer Palace in order to prevent the local sword cultivators and foreign sword cultivators from being too separated and easily becoming antagonistic, we came up with a solution that is not a solution, that is, each of us will mix sand into the other side's camp and plant spies, such as Chou Miao asked Wang Xinshui and Gu Jianlong to come closer to me, and I asked Song Gaoyuan and Deng Liang to stand in line with them. Deng Liang is a rebellious guy, a typical one who forgets friends when he sees sex. I agreed and I will not talk about him. But I persuaded Song Gaoyuan for a long time, and this kid was willing to complain with a grievance on his face, bite the bullet, bear the humiliation and surrender to the enemy. Chao Dagon and Scrofulary looked at each other in blank dismay, stunned for a long time. Did we misunderstand Song Gaoyuan? Song Gaoyuan was at a loss and he really felt sorry for his conscience, so he said honestly, there is no such thing at all. Qin Pingon sighed and said with certainty, you have it. Chao Gun asked softly, where is Lin Junbai? Is there no mission? Qin Pingon smiled and said, yes, why not? I had a heart-to-heart talk with him saying that I regarded him as a candidate for a hidden official cultivated ones. As long as they work hard, the future is boundless. That kid has an official addiction and he will be confused when he hears this. With bright eyes, think about it carefully. Does Lin Junbai have the drive to do things every day? Scrofulariaceae nodded and said, in this way it all makes sense. In fact, it was not easy for Song Gaoyuan. Deng Liang hoped for the return of a beautiful woman, but Song Gaoyuan didn't ask for anything, just a word of righteousness. Song Gaoyuan wrenched his fingers over there, muttering something. Chao Gun asked curiously, my brother Song Gaoyuan, what are you doing? Scrofulariaceae then asked, brother Song bears the burden of humiliation. If you have any grievances in your heart, speak out. Song Gaoyuan laughed and said, I'm counting how many people have been sold by Mr. Yingwen's words. Chou Miao, Wang Xinshui, Gu Jianlong, Mi Deng Liang, Lin Junbai. Qin Pingon laughed out loud. None of them intentionally avoided sorrow in their words. After leaving the Summer Palace and the Great Wall of Sword Qi, as long as you think about it, you can talk about it. Qin Pingon raised his arms and raised the flagon high. The other three young sword cultivators all carried wine jugs when they went out, so they all performed the same movements. This Xianxia mountain is recognized as a piece of sweet pastry that can make even a monk in the Ascension realm feel a little bit excited. An old man and a female cultivator came against the wind, and with the majestic energy, they split a large sea of clouds, and both master and apprentice stopped in the air. The woman's skin is more snowy, but she is wearing a black magic robe. The jade hairpin on her hair is black, and the scabbard is also made of jet black dragon tendons. She is also carrying a mountain travel tool made of black bamboo. What a Lishui that rushes to the sea and never returns, what a Chuanjiao mountain full of morals. A slim waist and limbs pass through the sea of clouds, and a landscape with one eyebrow faces Chanwan. Not all of them may recognize the old monk, but they must recognize the woman who is so beautiful. In Jinjiazu, there is a female sword fairy Song Pin who carries the Fuyao sword, and in Luxiazu Qinggong Mountain, there is a Nyatsuea with the Taoist name Mampa. There are two daughters in Sanzhou who are so beautiful in the world. He was talking about her in Song Pin. Now that Nyatsuea was recognized, the identity of the old man beside her was revealed. Sure enough, it was Jinghao, the Daoist Qinggong Taibao Jinglao ascended. Fuyao and Jinjia continents. After the war, there are no Ascension realm monks. It stands to reason that the existence of the deep mountain top of the city, such as the old fairy Jing, took advantage of the emptiness, whether it was to occupy Qianjiao Mountain alone, or to occupy Qianjiao Mountain in partnership with someone. Wouldn't it be possible to pinch it with his hands? Soon there were monks who thought they wanted to understand the joints. Is it possible that the old sword fairy who pretended to be in the Ascension realm was the first person in Fiazu and Luxiazu Luwei? Come first and cooperate with others and then sit back and divide the spoils? It is indeed a fight between Ascension realm, singing the double reed, playing us. Nyatsuea said from her heart. Master, that Jingdan is already here? Jinghao narrowed her eyes and said, since she hasn't shown herself at the gate of Baidi City, she will follow wherever the heartless sect Master Gao is. Although Nyatsuea didn't know what secret method Master used to track down the young sword fairy Gao Yi, But that female ghost was really annoying, so the Changyu cave, which was already in Master's pocket, was named Gao. Jinghao caressed her beard for a moment, and there was a lot of discussion along the way, saying that there was a sword cultivator in the Ascension realm who blatantly handed over the sword and expelled everyone from Xianxia Mountain. What a joke! It's a big joke in the world. Ascension-level sword cultivators, there are only a few who would go out and run around now. There are only a handful of ascending sword cultivators in Haoran Tianxia, and now the local great swordsmen have been transferred by the Confucian Temple to various fairies in the wilderness world. It is the new Feixing Baishang who returned to Beiju Luzhou to retreat and then exited. Also return as usual wild battlefield. As for a certain mountain on a certain continent in the east, it is naturally impossible to speculate with common sense. Could it be that Qin Pingon came here? Jinghao laughed softly and said, the Changyu Dongtian ruins, the big and small caves are intertwined, just like the orifice of a human body. Although it is incomplete and half-broken, it is still a place that is properly managed and handled, and there is a chance to create a new one. Ascension Feng Shui treasure land, but for me in Qinggong Mountain, it is the icing on the cake. Yes, of course it is the best. You and Gao Gong, whoever will be the first to become an immortal in the future, and the matter of proving the way of ascension will be settled. If not, that's because you two don't have enough opportunities, and being a teacher is not enough to tear your heart and lungs. On the contrary, the Shu Cave Master, who seemed calm from the beginning to the end, is heartbroken, and he is about to bite the socket of his back teeth. Changyu Dongtian is the thing that the pair of Taoist couples have waited for many years and are determined to obtain. Whether a pair of Taoist couples can ascend to the ascension, after all, it is a long-term plan that has completed its merits in one battle. In the end, a female ghost popped out, and she also claimed to be the ghost of Baidi City. Xu Nanyuan is about to grit her teeth and laugh as a teacher lost a big tooth, happy and happy. At the very beginning there was a private fight for the Changyu cave at Luxiazu on its own territory, and Jing Dan, a ghost and sword fairy, competed for this opportunity, and Jinghao didn't fear her at all. The one who really needs Jinghao's careful planning is Tianyu Dongshan's vigorous Xu Nanyuan, a new ascension who has accumulated external skills through hiding and hiding. In the territory of one continent, they are neighbors to each other, and there are few people who are in the right direction. Nietzsche also didn't like that Tianyu cave, especially the Taoist companion of Xu Nanyuan. As a teacher, I went to meet the young and promising sovereign Gao. Jinghao thought for a moment, then made a decision to hide her body and let the direct disciple beside her stay where she was, while Lao Feixing quietly entered the underground cave of Chuanjiao Mountain alone. After all, it's not in Luoba Mountain, especially without the wine table, let alone the persuasion of the boy and Xing-Yi. Jinghao's momentum is like two different people. Previously, the old Feixing, who was the leader of Izhou Mountain, had a pleasant face and kind eyes, like a fledgling Qi practitioner in the lower 5 realms. Now in this Fuyao Island, it can be said that it is like entering the land of no one, stepping back to the private house by the underground river, looking up at the water pavilion with bamboo curtains on 3 sides. With her hands behind her back, Jinghao squinted her eyes and smiled. Fellow Daoist, I meet you no matter where I go. Is it because you are sincerely making trouble for me, or do you feel sorry that you have won a Changyu cave and you want to come to the door to apologize? Gao Yi saw the old monk outside through the bamboo curtain, and his heart tightened. Probably this is called guilty conscience. With Zheng Dan guarding the way, Gao Yi didn't think it was a bit hot to take away the love of the Dongtian ruins from the hands of the 2 ascension realms. Now that Zheng Dan has completely divorced him and even said the hurtful words that kowtow at the gate of Baidi City is useless, Gao Yi felt like a pauper who is not good at drinking and suddenly drank a drink. Gulp of spirits, spit it out, reluctant to swallow it, worrying about scalding your throat and burning your stomach. Zheng Dan frowned and said, if you think it's an eyesore, stay away. Jinghao sneered and said, this place is the private residence of my disciples and grandchildren. Fellow Taoists do not do things properly, but their words are very funny. Gao Yi was extremely embarrassed and carefully glanced at Jing Dan, and the gauze maid with a calm expression who just continued to cook the wine. Jing Dan said indifferently, Qin Shanju and Laiyuan Academy invited me to rest here for a while. Jinghao frowned and asked, which one is Lord Qin? Jing Dan asked back, which Laiyuan Academy does fellow Daoist Jing not ask? Gao Yi became more and more nervous. If such words are not speculative, if the needle point is pointed at the wheat on, he is not a human being inside and out. Jinghao tucked her hands in her sleeves, silently making a formula for a moment. Her expression suddenly changed and she said with a hearty smile, So it's a friend of a friend. It's a coincidence, isn't it? Let's talk about it. This place is not worth a lot of money. Don't think it's shabby, that is, even if it is given to Jing. Fellow Daoist and Sovereign Gao have settled down. You are the stalker of Baidi City. The real backer of my Qinggong mountain is Jing Zhuzhong's master. A sword fairy named Jing Dan, Gao Yi, the fledgling young suzerain. His sect doesn't have long legs and he can't get out of Wuxia. An unknown person. Luck is a thing, gold is gold. But it is a dumpling for the poor family during the New Year's festival, which can't be eaten as 3 meals a day. I really don't believe that Jing Zhuzhong would protect a high suzerain who has no relatives and no reason. Jing Zhuzhong likes the ghost fairy Jing Dan. It's not surprising that he likes Gao Jianxian. Jing Hao wrote the name upside down. Of course he was very afraid of that young hermit official surnamed Qin. But to be honest, in the desolate mountain, Jing Hao is even more afraid of the little boy in Tsing Yi who can call the real master of Qinggong Mountain, Qin Xianjun brothers and sisters. I was really tired from the few meals at Luopa Mountain. For some reason at the table, Qin Lingjun would always toast his own wine whenever he had the opportunity, and say a few nice things along the way to the Bang Qin Zhuoliu. And the Dragon Slayer looked at Jing Hao's performance with a smile. It was really wrong for Jing Hao to drink or not to drink, and he didn't know whether to toast or punish him. In that unfathomable Luopa Mountain, it really doesn't matter whether you are in the Ascension state or not in the Ascension state. Jing Dan, Shu Nanyuan, and even the upper and lower sects of Qinggong Mountain felt that his trip was to recruit soldiers and buy horses, and contact some old friends from other continents. There is no reason to say that the mute eats coptis. Just when Jing Hao was still wondering if Xing Don please was her grand gesture, an extremely familiar warm voice sounded behind her. Daoist Jing, we haven't seen each other for a few days and we meet again. Jing Hao hurriedly turned around to salute and said with a smile, I have seen Master Qin Shan, Immortal Ning Jian Chao. Sovereign Master. Originally he wanted to call the junior Chao Gun by his first name, but Jing Hao changed his words when the words came to his lips. After all, that kid was standing next to Qin Pingon and Ning Yao, to be precise he was in the middle of them. Then Jing Hao immediately knew it. Such an arrangement was done on purpose. The young hermit was clearly a family member of her family who was helping the summer palace, and came to persuade him to drink for Jing Hao. On the top of the ancestral mountain of the Fangxuan sect where Chao Gun lives, there is a gushy cliff with the word, bending the sky, engraved on it, which is one of the few authentic works of the most proud man in the world. The founder of the mountain with the Taoist name Chongqing, opened a study here, also named Chongqing. After that, the suzerains of all dynasties studied here and practiced Taoism. The hereditary title of nobility is the only honor in the history of Haoran Tianxia. The first patriarch who originated from the Fangxuan sect, once followed Li Xing to the outer space, and together with the group of monks who ascended to the sky, chased down the remnants of the gods in the vast and boundless realm of Taishu. And this Chongqing Taoist who rose to the sky after 100 years of Taoism, fell into the sky. Before he died he had a last wish, saying that he hoped that the disciples of the sect would inherit his Taoist name. One day, when someone from the Fangxuan sect is able to unite the 14 realms of Taoism and achieve true immortality, this precious Taoist name will be returned to Haoran Tianxia. Li Xing personally agreed to this matter. Since it is a matter appointed by the Sage of Rites for thousands of years, a vast number of Qi practitioners in the world, no matter how much they covet the longevity Taoist name, they can only stare blankly, not daring to have any attempt or act of arrogance. And the previous suzerain of Fangxuan sect is a person who has ascended to the realm of ascension, and his attainments in refining things have reached the pinnacle. His reputation, character and virtue on Wuxia mountain are indeed comparable to Jing Hao, who is the leader of Izhou Immortal Master. Slightly quite a few points. After all, Jing Hao is the leader of Izhou Immortal Master, and he is very well informed about the gossip. He knows that Feng Kunzong is going to establish the next sect in Friazhou, which seems to be called Zijizong. Indeed, as rumored outside, Chao Gun will be the acting suzerain. When one reaches the Jade Roar realm, the word generation will be removed. Chao Gun performed the Daoist ceremony and said with a smile, Young Chao Gun, I have seen old Immortal Master Jing. Jing Hao laughed heartily and said, Sect Master Chao, you don't need to be too polite. In the future, if you have something to do with your next sect on Fiao Island, please let me know. Say hello to Gao Gong. My apprentice will soon be the national teacher of the Jinpu dynasty. Maybe Gao Geng can't help much, it's a big help, but it's sure to help. Ning Yao looked towards the water pavilion inside the bamboo curtain. A certain young swordsman who once asked Qin Pingon face to face whether he was nervous or not, felt like a light on his back for a moment. The ugly maid whom Jing Dan called the Huansha maid held a wine cup in both hands and invited with a smile. A survivor of the subjugated state in ancient times, Shi Yiguang, a lonely ghost, met Ning Jianxian. Many years ago I once went to the inverted mountain with Mr. Fan, and I was fortunate enough to visit Ning Mansion. Although I failed to buy the piece of Zhanlong Cliff to treat my heart disease, Mr. Fan stayed in your mansion for several months. Climb to the top of the city and wait until you have seen the real sky high and earth wide. Unknowingly, the heart disease healed itself. Ning Yao looked soft, nodded, stretched out his hand to lift the bamboo curtain, stepped into the waterside pavilion, took the wine cup from the woman who had cast a blind eye, thanked him and said, "Susie has something to say, my heart is at ease. It's my hometown." Qin Ping walked along the river with Jinghao and asked a question seemingly casually. "Your Daoist Jing and Cave Master Shu have been neighbors for many years. What kind of person do you think he is?" Jinghao smiled and said, "Master Qin Shan's question seems to be too general." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "Then narrow the scope and only look at the Cave Master Shu from the perspective of Jinghao." Jinghao thought for a moment, carefully selected her words and said, "Personally, I don't like this new ascension from the same continent." Qin Ping raised his hands, tapped his fingers and was silent for a moment, then asked, "Is it because he could ascend earlier, but he proved his ascension after the war?" Jinghao smiled and said nothing. "This is the answer. I don't know who gave the first evaluation. Yeshu is like a dog and a genealogy is like a snake." Later, a more harsh statement was derived. Wild repairs are like domestic dogs and genealogy is like wild dogs. There are many Yamazawa wild men who like to bark when they see people. A real wild dog can bite to death just by opening its mouth. Jinghao said some very sincere words. So this time I competed with Tianyu Dongtian for the opportunity that was under the noses of both parties. Well, I'm trying to tear my skin apart with Tianyu Dongtian, and am deliberately arranging those troops in order to make them so powerful. In fact, I'm ready to withdraw at any time. The best plan is to make peace with Shu Nanyuan and negotiate a share. My side only accounts for 20 to 30%, that's enough. I have to fight. It's the realm of Ascension realm, the nominal number 1 immortal master in Luxiazu, and the dual identity of the master of Qinggong Mountain which forces me to fight. Indisputable, I really don't want to fight with Shu Nanyuan and Tianyu Dongtian suddenly. Take a step back and say, in my Qinggong Mountain, there are only a few hard-to-achieve disciples like Nyatsuea and Gao Geng, but that couple has a good son who is one of the 10 young candidates in the world. Shu Nanyuan, the owner of Tianyu Cave, has the Taoist name Jiao Ming. And there are many self-titles Zhuangxi, Hanren, and Sui. Next, Qin Pingon asked another question that was far from the topic. Dragon Pavilion in Zhongtu, are you familiar with Daoist Jing? Jinghao couldn't keep up with Qin Shan's his train of thought, so she thought carefully for a while before saying, "Not familiar, I only had face-to-face friendship with the two suzerains, but I drank wine at the same table a few times with the contemporary master. Qingshan Mountain. However, I met Situ Xianjun with the Taoist name Longbeard at the foot of Luxiaza Mountain. Both of us hid our identities back then. Hilarious, this person is good, his style of conversation, Taoism and demeanor are all first class. It's a pity that Situ Mengjing doesn't have the will to be the suzerain. Otherwise Delonqiu will be the master of the family, and I believe he can take a big step forward." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "Business is booming." Jinghao was very suspicious. She was afraid that this Lord Qin Shan would feint a shot and spread a false imperial decree, and it would be difficult for him to check with that Qin Xianjun. Fortunately, Qin Pingon didn't continue to say anything to scare people, but just said that Gao Geng was in the Tiefu Jiangshui mansion, and he married two brothers with different surnames as Jin Ranchi and they got along very well. Jinghao suddenly glanced at Qin Pingon. Qin Ping turned a blind eye on purpose. "Examine me? To judge my level of realm depth of Dao power?" Jinghao really had this intention. Seeing Master Chen's unaware posture, he was not sure about the true cultivation of the sword fairy around him for a while. It turned out that when Jinghao and Qin Pingon were walking along the river, a fast-moving Liuxiao boat appeared at the Xianxia ferry closest to the Chuanjiao mountain boundary. On the ferry, two famous local monks in Fuyao Island stood side by side, Lu Wei and Yang Qinggu. This made the local monks in Friazu who still chose to stay outside and wait to watch the fun secretly happy. As the dragon crossing the river, Jinghao was destined to fail. In addition, those who came here from other continents to fish in troubled waters were also cautious and did not rush back to the mountains. They also felt that if there was no fight in Xianxia Mountain, it would be unreasonable. These great monks on the top of the mountain who can't see the end of the dragon seem to have made an appointment. They either don't show themselves in front of people, or they like to appear in groups when they show up. Fuyazu used to be a mountaintop pattern where the north and the south faced each other. Lu Yu from Tianyao Township in the north and Yang Qinggu, a ghost cultivator in the back mountain in the south, were both in the Ascension realm. Yang Qinggu, the originator of House Han, has a bumpy way of cultivating Taoism, coupled with an upright personality, making enemies on all sides, and a sect, sheltering many ghost cultivators and heroic spirits. Once plotted by the enemies, Yang Qinggu went on a killing spree, killing more than 100 genealogy monks, and finally Yaxing came to Fuyazu and forcibly detained him in the Gongda forest of Zhongtu Confucian Temple. Even though the battle in Fuyao continent was horrific and the entire continent fell to pieces, this Ascension realm ghost immortal still couldn't leave his meritorious deeds. Lin Half-Step. The person in charge of the affairs is Ghost Xiu, the Vice Mountain Master. A back mountain at the beginning of Zone was personally breached by the throne monster baying, and there were no monks in the genealogy. Almost all the monks of the upper 5 realms and the earth immortals died in battle. The reason for almost is because only one is responsible for protecting them. The Master's Golden Core Ghost with a group of young direct disciples evacuated together. There are less than 10 people in total. There is not even a guardian of Yupu and Yuanying. At the last Ancestral Hall discussion in House Han that year, there were some objections to it at first, and a relatively young Yupujing was going to be enshrined to protect those younger monks from retreating from House Han. The deputy mountain chief stood up to everyone's arguments, and without saying too much he persuaded the entire Patriarch Hall with just one sentence. When our mountain master created the mountain, he was also a golden core. In today's eye-catching Liuxiao boat, apart from Lu Wei and Yang Qiangu, the rivals of the past, there are also a few unfamiliar faces on board. Judging from their positions, they don't look like juniors or entourages. It is true that Lu Wei had official duties in the Confucian Temple, but this time he went back to Luxiazu for retreat at the Xiazong, and once he left the customs he returned to the Ascension realm. It happened that Yang Qinggu escaped from Gongda Forest, but he still needed to go to the wild world, so he made an appointment to take the time to return to his hometown Fuyazu together. The monks on the same boat, and Beta Sheng Guken, he is the first enshrinement of the new House Han. The personal maid Gulingyu. There is also a female fairy who is about to land the entire Jintue city near Chuanjiao Mountain in Fuyazu Zhengqingjia. Tianyao Township, suzerain Lu Huai. He was a vulture-like boy with a cold temperament, his eyes were heavy and he was staring down with his palms outstretched. Lu Hui was rescued by Qi Tingji on the battlefield back then. This old Feishing, who had returned to his original appearance but could not hide his old age, had just fallen by 1 level. The other side, it's over the city wall. The lower sect of Tianyao Township was built in Luxiazu, and has a white porcelain cave that ranks among the 72 small caves. Lu Yu spent many years recuperating there, and when he left the customs for the first time he went to the Zhongtu Confucian Temple to participate in the discussion, and it was still in the fairyland. Fuyao continent is a well-recognized small continent that is only slightly larger than Aquarius continent. Before Lu Yu was born and successfully proved his way and ascended, Fuyao continent's status in the Hauran world was no better than Aquarius continent. Travel go out short. If it weren't for the appearance of Lu Wei, the entire Fuyao continent would not have ascended for nearly 5,000 years. Therefore Lu Xian's successful ascension was hailed as a resolved by heaven, by various continents and mountains. At that time he participated in the discussion of the Confucian Temple and appeared in Yuanyangzu. Lu Hui appeared together with the 2 immortals Qinzhao and Zhou Xian in Luxiazu. Lu Hui frowned and said, "There are a few places in the Fengshui cave that are so weird that you can't see them through." During the retreat period, thanks to the heavy rain, Lu Hui has now returned to Ascension, so it stands to reason that he shouldn't be unable to see through the scene inside Chuanjiao Mountain. The majestic Yang Qinggu said indifferently, "Whether it's weird or magical you'll know as soon as you go. I'd like to see if Jinghao, a countryman from outside, can take this vein of mine away from me." Lu Hui smiled and said, "Jinghao is not a stunned young man, this guy is notorious for planning before he can act. And he just showed up now. He probably already knows where Quan Jiaoshan really belongs. Yang Qinggu turned his head, changed his expression and said with a smile, Gu Shaoi, what do you say? Do you want me to drive some obtrusive things out of the mountain? Gukan smiled and said, those who don't know are not guilty. Let the younger generation release the news first. If there are ghosts and ghosts who dare to hide their evil intentions, please stop them as soon as possible and teach them a lesson. Yang Qinggu, who never underestimated others, praised, Gu Xiaoyu is mature and prudent, and he really has the demeanor of a suzerain. In Fengshui Cave, there are private houses on both sides of the underground river, and the lights are brightly lit all day long, making it difficult to distinguish day from night. The timid ones stayed outside watching from a distance. There were also bold ones who rushed back to their own territory one after another. Fortunately, they were not caught by thieves. Those poor fellows who were in the middle of the before didn't have the mind to fight with each other at this moment. Since they were all driven out of the Fengshui Cave by the old sword fairy in the Ascension realm, and they are all grandsons, then no one should pretend to be a master. Friaza Mountain's fierce and martial style is probably only inferior to that of Beiju Luzhou. On the riverside road, a group of people who appeared here out of thin air walked against the current. Yang Qinggu and Gukan walked side by side. Lu Hui, who lowered his head and thought about things, was invisible behind them, discussing with Zheng Qingjia about the specific matters of Jinsui City's landing and taking root. There were a few Leng Taoqing, who were just fledgling and went down the mountain to practice, and they didn't take care of their eyes and mouth. After all, Yang Qinggu has been detained by the Confucian Temple for many years, and this Ascension Realm ghost Immortal has never liked to show his face. What's more, it's the norm for a world-renowned Ascension Realm to hear about it and never see it. Yang Qinggu frowned, but he hadn't returned to Friazu for more than 100 years, and the foot of the mountain was like this. Gu Ken, who looked normal, just moved sideways, intentionally or unintentionally moved 2 steps, just to give way to Lu Hui, who was behind him. Lu Wei just raised his head. The onlookers on both sides of the mansion who had just walked out of the mansion suddenly scattered, and some of them forgot to close the door and went back home directly over the wall. One side goes down the current, the other side goes up the current, just facing each other across the bank. Zheng Qingjia and Gu Lingzhen held their hands together at the same time, and gave a blessing to the green shirt guest on the other side. Qin Pingon smiled and cupped his fists in return. Lu Wei still had a naturally sinister look, but he still reminded Yang Qinggu with his heart. The one opposite is the last hermit official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the most famous young man among several Jiazi in the world. As for Jinghao in Qinggong Mountain, Lu Wei didn't even bother to introduce it, and of course there was no need to introduce it. Jinghao smiled and said, You can congratulate Yu Dao Yu Lu for returning to the top. Congratulations for Yu Dao Yang being free again. As long as he is not in Luopa Mountain, Jing Lao's hen is worthy of Qin Lingjun's top ranking in that passerby collection. Yang Qinggu sarcastically said, Lu Wei, is it because I am dazzled? Why did I see such a big tortoise shell? Why did I float here from Luxiazu across the sea? Is this where the war is still going on and came to help us in Friazu? Lu Xian's next clan was established in Luxiazu after all, and he still wanted to give Jinghao a bit of a favor, so he didn't agree. Jinghao laughed and said, Why would a tortoise with a shrunken head talk about a tortoise's shell? Yang Qinggu, who was exposed to the most heartbreaking part of the short story, would strike at the slightest disagreement. Jinghao sneered, Fellow monks, practice your hands, I'm afraid you'll be an egg. Qin Pingon reached out and patted the arm of fellow Daoist Jing beside him, looked at the burly man and said in his heart, Hao Su, the criminal officer who can be regarded as half a local monk in Friazu, let me tell Master Yang Shan that he is very grateful to you back then. Said a few words of righteousness. Yang Qinggu was stunned for a moment and said, Don't say polite words that are empty-headed. I don't like to hear them. I can't pretend to be polite and greetings when I am too young. Hao Su, the criminal officer, would like to convey a few words. If I really want to thank you, please come up with something real. I am now rebuilding the mountain gate in the back mountain, and a lot of waste is waiting to be done. In addition, my army is about to be disbanded. The mountain top wants to restore its pre-war heyday. Momentum is difficult. In the next 100 years or even 200 to 300 years, there may be a lack of a real master who can handle things sitting on the top of the mountain. I heard that he went to Baiyujing in Qingming Tianxia, so let him find a chance, go back to Haoran Tianxia on the golden and jade genealogy of the Patriarch Hall. Write the name or not, it is up to him, but he had to say a few harsh words. For 300 years, the back mountain was covered by his arrogance. Qin Ping agreed first, remembered something and said with a smile, Mr. Jing thinks highly of House Han? According to legend, Jing Juzhong once appeared in Friazhou. One person even personally found the group of young ghost cultivators who had returned to the Friazhou Zongmen ruins. The back mountain boundary, which has been reduced to ruins, is waiting for them. After they met, they said, since a crowd of people is not as good as ghosts in the world, so what if there are more ghosts in the back mountain? Yang Qinggu said bluntly, now the whole world is afraid of Mr. Zheng. Even though I am a ghost, I am also afraid of him. One thing, Yang Qinggu is very self-aware. Zheng Juzhong appreciates those young disciples from House Han, but not necessarily Yang Qinggu, who has been imprisoned in the Gongda forest for many years. Yang Qinggu thought for a while and asked a question that he had been curious about for a long time. Qin Pingon, what state are you in now? In fact, Yang Qinggu has a good impression of this young sword fairy who has heard of it in the Gongda forest. But this Ascension realm has always been straightforward in his words and actions. Qin Pingon couldn't help laughing and just cupped his fists towards the opposite bank. The relationship is not that familiar. Qin Ping asked Gu Kan with his heart, have you met Lu Yuzhou? Gu Kan replied with a smile. It's settled, he will be the deputy suzerain. Then Jing Qingjia will be in charge of the money, and Huangli Island Zhongsu will be in charge of the law. I have seen that Eugene and I am willing to be the chief priest. Qin Pingon nodded. With this kind of rudimentary form of the sect, the spirit is really not small. Jinghao originally felt a little resentful towards Qin Shanxi's dissuading action of clapping his arms. Since we are not in Loba Mountain, Qin Daoyu stretched his hand too long. Qin Pingon seemed to have guessed the thoughts of old Immortal Jing and said with a smile from his heart, when you go out you can make money with kindness. Fellow Daoist Jing doesn't think I'm troublesome, does he? Jinghao stroked her beard with a smile and said, you Daoist Qin thought too much and said something very strange. Qin Pingon nodded and said, that's good. It's better to think more than to make mistakes. Jinghao twirled her beard with 2 fingers, narrowed her eyes for a moment. Endless? Why, when you are used to being a host you like to be a teacher everywhere, in and out of the mountains. Regarding Qin Pingan's true state, he had previously climbed the main road of Luopa Mountain with Qin Xianjun, the real master of Qinggong Mountain, but Qin Qinglu had actually leaked the secret for Jinghao. Qin Xianjun would never lie to him about Jinghao. Such a young hermit official is now just a hidden secret nascent soul realm. The reasoning makes sense. The sword is open to support the Moon Mountain, and the words are engraved on the top of the city, so there is no price. I heard that Qin Pingon used to travel in the rivers and lakes and liked to suppress the situation the most, but now it doesn't help. Instead he needs to bluff and pretend that he is a sword fairy? Just thinking about it this way, Jinghao felt sorry for him. Always felt that a young man who had made great contributions to Yuhaoren should not be so downcast. It seems that let alone pressing down his arm before, the young man just yelled to stop himself, pretending to be a tiger. It was nothing. Jinghao sighed, stretched out her hand and patted the green-clothed arm beside her with gentle movements, then turned her head to comfort this Qin Shanju, who is different from the past on the way of cultivation. Fellow Taoist Imo, be discouraged. Qin Ping smiled and nodded. It seems that the morning wine between Immortal Jing and Qin Lingjun was not in vain. I'll go back first. A woman's voice sounded beside him, separated by Qin Daoyu. Qin Pingon smiled softly. Okay. Jinghao leaned forward slightly and saw the woman's face clearly. Qin Pingon stopped and helped to introduce Qinggong Mountain Luxiazu Senior Jinghao, whose Taoist name is Qinggong Taibao, took the initiative to visit our Luopa Mountain for a long time not long ago. She turned around and clasped her fists and said, Ascension to Ningyao, I met Senior Jing. Jinghao's heart kept pounding. She swallowed and hurriedly returned the gift. The old monk took the opportunity to calm down and said softly, don't dare to call yourself a senior on Ning Jiangxian's side. As Ning Yao is the #1 person in the colorful world, if she is only a sword cultivator at the ascension level, Jinghao believes that she should never be so surreptitious, and let her old ascendant be unaware. So, Immortal Jing understood again. But this time he didn't guess the wrong answer. A long rainbow of sword energy with a blurred avenue went straight into the sky, stretched out a seemingly endless beam of bright light on the territory of Friazhou, broke through the sky and went straight to another world without opening the door. Jinghao witnessed this magnificent scene at a close distance. The old man couldn't help but feel swayed. She is really beautiful, like a jade sword, like a rainbow, Song Pin and his disciple Nyetsuya are far inferior to Ning Yao. Qin Pingon retracted his gaze earlier and said with a smile in his heart, "Fellow Daoist Jing, to be honest, I am not in the nascent soul realm, but now I am a fairy." Jing Hao understood again, nodded and said in a deep voice, "I understand, Qin Dao, you must be a great sword immortal. Even if you, Qin Pingon Dao, say that you are in the 14th realm, I will nod. Otherwise, it will be considered that I, Jing, have spent nearly 3,000 years of monastic life in vain. Anyway, you and Ning Yao are Taoist couples. Since they are a family, there is no need to distinguish the realms so clearly. The realms of the two of you, one is the 14th realm, the other is the nascent soul realm. Even, aren't you both in the immortal realm?" Jing Hao couldn't help but sigh in her heart. It's nice to be young, to eat soft food and not to be talked about by outsiders. Just in an instant Jing Hao's heartstrings were tense. Something was wrong. How did Qin Pingon know that he knew that he was in the nascent soul realm? Qin Ping smiled and cupped his hands and said, "The matter of realm can't be evened out. Farewell." Before Jing Hao came back to his senses the next moment, wearing a green shirt, his body was also transformed into nothingness. It was like thunder, and it was thousands of miles away in a blink of an eye. Sword of Coming Chapter 11:14. There is a bright moon on the sea. The word Xing is really wonderful and has an endless aftertaste. Even if it is a sword fairy who uses the method of imagining, no matter how fast the sword is, it is definitely not as good as the Sanshan talisman that crosses continents casually, and it is also not as good as that night sailing ship. A misty Dharma figure flitted across thousands of islands in the sea. Above the sea, the majestic sword energy broke through countless seas of clouds, and Qingying opened up extremely long roads in the clouds. Occasionally, a waterborne looked up in horror, only to see the cyan sword light flashing away, flickering on and off, and after a while, there was a series of deafening thunder, resounding in the lonely sea and sky. Occasionally, the sword fairy lowered Yujian's figure, and his sword energy cut through the waves. He passed a certain island hanging over seas, and the emerald green in the mountains leaned to one side, rustling. Passing through an unknown fairy house on the sea, there are row upon row of gorgeous buildings and bright lights. The cyan figure that was about to hit the island in a straight line was divided into dozens of sword lights in an instant, high and low, just bypassing the ancestral mountain. The radiant sword light, which was separated from the mountain, dragged out dazzling trails in the air, radiant with brilliance, and recondensed into a line on the sea more than 100 miles away. During the interval between breath adjustment and breathing, the light of the sword slowed down, and Qin Pingon showed his figure. Drawing a half-arc, his green shirt floated on the sea, striding on the waves, his sleeves fluttering, full of sea breeze. Wanting to meet a ferry boat in the vast sea or a chi refiner who travels far away with the wind is tantamount to finding a needle in a haystack. Tonight Qin Pingon really met one. This man was driving a talisman boat, slowly following a magical cloud shining under the moon, and the young monk threw his pole into the sea of clouds. Qin Pingon stopped at the edge of the sea of colorful clouds. The leisurely young fishing man raised his eyes and asked in the elegant words of Nan Pasujo, "Who is it?" Qin Pingon smiled in the most mellow and authentic Najo dialect, "The land who went out to sea to visit the gods." The young man twisted his wrist, pulled out the rod and scattered the bait. Ripples burst into the sea of colorful clouds, pulled back the fishing line, and rubbed a piece of secret again. Put the bait on the hook, throw the rod once and the wind roars. The golden fishing line, which is so tiny and undetectable, is more than 100 feet long. The young man smiled. "A fellow?" Qin Pingon nodded and said, "The master of this way is not weaker than others." The young man couldn't help laughing and didn't speak a word, while the suspicious-looking strange man in blue shirt just stood there, his figure fluttering with the clouds, and he looked at it patiently for half an hour. The young man had no choice but to say, "I often sit for tens of years and I may not be able to catch a fish once. If you wait for me to catch a colorful winged crested fish before leaving, I'm afraid you will be disappointed." Qin Ping raised his chin and asked, "Show me the fish basket?" A bamboo fish basket was tied to the bow, which disappeared into the clouds. "The rank is not bad, it is clearly a Dragon King basket on the mountain." The young man smiled and said, looking at no one around, "Are you sure that I don't have a Taoist protector, that you're bullying me, that I'm not of a high level, and that you plan to kill people and rob me?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Fellow Daoist is Da? Water from South Pazuo continent?" The young man with an ancient jade seal hanging from his waist frowned and said nothing. Did this person come prepared? Want both the Dragon King basket and this ancestral token? Today's Kai Yishio has a lot of appetite. It couldn't be because I bumped into a wild remnant hiding in the sea, right? Very good. Small fish don't eat big fish. Let me weigh this person's weight. Long Qing, the originator of Da Shui, who is also the young master, once obtained an ancient stone box protected by A and Man in. There were 5 seals in the box. Confucian Temple. Long Qing meticulously refined the jade seal on that side was 300 years old, and it has become the treasure of Da. At this moment, it is hanging on the waist of the young monk. The young man put away his fishing rod, stood up and reported his identity. Da Shui Caiji Prefecture, Zhou Xian. Please tell me the name of your fellow Taoist and teach you the Dharma. Qin Ping waved his hand, indicating that he had no intention of discussing Taoism, and said with a smile, I am very familiar with Yuan Qingshu. The young man asked with a smile, Does Uncle Yuan know you well? Qin Pingon nodded and said, Familiar too. Lu Xiang narrowed his eyes and said, Why don't you be more straightforward and say that there is a no-things sign above your shop, with the phrase this place should know that I Yuan Qingshu is a sword fairy? I never thought that the guy was really shameless, so he nodded and said, Fellow Daoist helped me say what I wanted to say. Luckily Lu Xiang is not weak in raising energy, otherwise I would have yelled at him. I was fishing in the South China Sea, which is far away from Aquarius continent, and when I met a passerby, he said that he was the last hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Did you think that Shan Xiexi was stupid because of money, or did you think I, Lu Xiang, were stupid? Qin Pingon said, Li Kai once returned a broken Yangjian gourd to Da Shui. Lu Xiang was puzzled. How did this guy know such a secret inside story? Qin Pingon said, Yuan Jianxian is addicted to wine. He once joked with Gao Kuei at the top of the city that he used raised sword gourds to store wine, and used the name of a big demon to hide the current wine and vegetables. The taste is endless, the most delicious. Lu Xiang asked, Who are you? Damn, if you are really that young hermit official, I will take your surname. In short, Lu Xiang just didn't believe that the person in green shirt in front of him happened to be the Qin Jianxian who he was thinking about. There was no such a coincidence in the world. Besides, Li Kai and other sword celestials who have been visiting Da J. This Lu Xiang, through various mountain rumors and gossip, verified the statement of some intercontinental ferry stewards and captains that the young hermit official was indeed vigorous and resolute. The most important thing is that they all swear that the young sword fairy is not ordinary handsome, and outsiders can recognize his unusualness at a glance. Lu Xiang took a closer look. The man in front of him, with a hosta on his head, a green shirt, long gown and cloth shoes in terms of appearance, can only be regarded as Zhou Xian in terms of demeanor. Silly, he stood there and watched himself fishing for half an hour. It must not be Qin Pingon. Qin Pingon smiled and said, Friends of Taoism are vulgar. Don't you respect your appearance? Lu Xiang held back for a long time and asked tentatively, Fellow Daoist, did you use the Immortal family disguise technique? Qin Pingon was speechless for a moment. If it's not a sword repair, it's just difficult to talk about. After all, Lu Xiang was lucky and wanted to chat a few words, but saw the man in the blue shirt wave his sleeves, and in an instant, a sea of colorful clouds surged violently, and several fishes jumped out of the clouds by themselves and jumped into the talisman boat. The next moment the green shirt was gone and Lu Xiang lingered in his ear. Daoist friends returned home, just said that they caught it by themselves, so there is no need to go to the Nanhai fish market to buy it. Lu Xiang was in a daze. Although he was still unable to determine the identity of the other party, they were people of the same path, so they must be right. Then at the border between the South China Sea and the East China Sea, Qin Pingon suddenly stopped and looked down at a bright moon in the sea. There was an old Taoist priest in purple clothes with a gourd on his back, slowly rising from the bright moon. It was a phantom that Zhou Xian used supernatural powers to appear in the world. Qin Ping slapped the boss. The younger generation has met you, Laoren. Zhou Xian returned the salute with a smile. You don't need to be too polite, Daoist Qin. Qin Ping asked with a smile. Are you worried that the younger generation will mislead the younger generation? Zhou Xian waved his hands and said, How is that possible? The poor way's vision of seeing people, and the preaching skills of fellow Taoists are the best in the world. That's what I said, but after all, it was a bit shocking for a person in the fairyland to dare to speak of the method of ascension. At that time Bai Jing would have mistakenly thought that his mountain master was drunk and talking drunk. Yu Xian was naturally still a little worried. Walking hand in hand on the sea covered with moonlight like snow-white fish scales, knowing the old man's worries, Qin Pingon carefully said his words and said slowly, "This closed-door practice, the real years that Taoist Ding needs to pass away, are 10 years short. Years as long as 100 years. Yu Xian silently twisted his beard. You have to figure it out. With Daoist Ding's monastic aptitude, it is not impossible for him to ascend the Tao within 200 to 300 years. Qin Pingon said to himself, it's not that it can't take longer but it's meaningless. Yu Xian finally couldn't help but asked, how do you say? Qin Ping smiled and said, don't you say that there is a jiazi in the mountain and it has been 1,000 years in the world? How can the imaginary age of a cultivator be compared with the first year of a common man at the bottom of the mountain? Yu Xian became nervous and tentatively said, Qin Daoist Ding is a poor Taoist. The best seedling under the sect, even if the jade is not perfect, you have to have a degree, right? How about revealing the details to a bystander like Pin Dao? The so-called virtual years old, how old is it? Qin Ping just gave a vague answer. The shortest is 10,000 years and the longest is 100 million years. Yu Xian was stunned. Half true and half false. Really, it is Qin Daoyu's method that is really unimaginable, ingenious, and thought of something that no one has ever thought of. False. I am still worried about Daoist Ding drifting with the tide in the long river of time, spending too much time, and a Taoist heart can't survive. Qin Pingon smiled and said, those who see the true self in the chaos can prove the Tao outside the Tao and ascend. Yu Xian asked, can you explain it carefully? Qin Ping shook his head and said, if you don't want to, you really can't. Yu Xian stretched out his hand and grabbed Qin Pingan's arm. It's only been a few days since we saw each other and now Daoist Qin is separated. We were at the top of Jilin Peak before and we talked very sincerely. Dao Qin, you still owe me 500 coins of gold and fine copper. It's rare for the poor to take a trip to Howren. Qin Ping said helplessly, in the future I will regularly inform seniors about the progress of Daoist Ding's practice. Exactly. Yu Xian nodded and said, that's fine. There is a surprise from time to time, and it's more worth looking forward to than a one-shot deal. Qin Pingon thought for a while and gave an obscure so-called answer. The method of ascension that I have figured out must first seek self-proof, then build a bridge of longevity and finally seek the way outside. Yu Xian chewed for a while. It's worthwhile for the poor to have just heard this talk. Qin Pingon began to change the subject and asked, Senior, is there anything else you want to say here? Yu Xian hummed and stretched out his fingers to the distance. I made a temporary calculation earlier and there will be a reunion in the near future. It can be said to be related to you. Of course it can have nothing to do with it. It depends on whether you are willing to swim in the muddy water. Qin Pingan guessed the general reason and with a decision in his heart he asked a digression. Why has there never been a mountain sitting on the Quanjiao mountain in Fuyao Island? Whether it was officially established by the imperial court, or the heroic spirits built their own temples, good like never before in history. Yu Xian hesitated for a moment and said with a smile, the mountains and rivers are full of spirits, they are either gods or immortals. There are always those who like to be pure when they practice supernatural powers or immortals in the mountains. The old man put away the illusion of the moon phase, while Qin Pingon continued to swim far away on the sea with his sword. A few Taoist priests who teach the classics work as free masters in Jumping Fish Mountain together, and help the monks carefully selected by the 8 Great Li dynasty to teach some secrets that do not involve the sect and do not violate the taboos on the mountain superficial way. Actually it's not a difficult task, but these 4 Taoist priests with different ancestors, they don't see each other when they look up and down every day. As time goes by they naturally get to know each other better. It is also in Tao Yushan where the boxing is taught in the martial arts field, and the place of preaching here is in an empty hall. There are a few futons on the ground which are said to be purchased from Sanlang Temple in Luzhou, Beiju with a lot of money. Have to. Bai Feng and the others have all talked about their situation, but Xiangtong is the only one who refuses to say a word. At that time even Shui Jisue, the heavenly ruler with the highest realm and seniority, made no secret of it, saying that he was led by Qin Shanju into a 9-story glazed pagoda, with an extra broom in his hand, and we would sweep the pagoda together every day. Shui Jisue from the bottom. After sweeping, Qin Pingon began to sweep the tower from the top floor. Whenever Shui Jisue chose to sweep from the top floor, Qin Ping would sweep from the first floor again. Today he was chased by Liang Chaoguan again. Xiangtong was really annoyed by them, so he squeezed out 2 words between his teeth: walk around. It's really not that Xiangtong is hypocritical, it's really unbearable to look back on the past. Every time he thinks about it, Xiangtong can't help but shed tears of bitterness for himself. It turned out that because of his high-level, strange methods and confusion, he insisted on dragging Xiangtong through thousands of mountains and rivers together, spending about 100 years of illusory time. The surname Qin always likes to give him difficult problems, which makes him lose his whole body of Taoism, and there is no aura in the world, but he wants to force him to be a beggar who fled from the country, and insists on relying on his ability to rely on a broken bowl. Only the gentry on the wealthy side can pass the test. Having worked as a fast-moving subordinate in the county government for many years, relying on with a little ancestral 3-legged cat handle, but every day to arrest those gangsters who fly around the walls casually, and wipe out some water bandits, he was almost hacked to death several times. The imperial list of the capital announces the good news as an errand runner begging for a few bounties from the gentry of Xianxia. Finally relying on his clever legs and feet, he knows how to climb over the wall and take shortcuts, and when he gets the money he may even be blocked in the alley by a few colleagues after punching and kicking. The guy would jump out and say a few nasty words like, in broad daylight, under the feet of the emperor, don't be too arrogant, scaring away those bastards, and then he put his arms around his chest and leaned against the wall, smiling and looking at the blue-nosed face. The swollen self staggered to his feet. Qin Pingon even asked him to do the river and lake work of crushing boulders in the chest in the downtown area of the thoroughfare or at the water transport dock. But that guy has already started to shout loudly, selling dolly pills. Occasionally there are some leisurely mountain trips. The guy said that it was a combination of work and rest, and he was afraid that his Taoism would collapse, and it would be difficult to explain to fellow Taoists in the future. Wearing straw sandals and carrying a basket on the back of the mountain to collect herbs together, and visiting the Immortals to enjoy the scenery, the guy was full of nonsense and nonsense. Some doggerel poems that neither understand the allusions nor match the rhythm of the rhyme. Xiaolian Tandra only Qin doctor. Once in the capital of the dynasty he took over a boot shop whose business was sluggish. How could Xiangtong know this? So he was blinded. In the end, under the guidance of Qin, Xiangtong sold a list of officials by the way. Really making money up. Xiangtong has also been a silversmith who steals, rapes and plays tricks. Not only is he a businessman full of money, but Xiangtong, who thinks he has a bottom line in life, is about to turn against that guy directly. However, they also opened a good incense and candle shop outside a certain temple. Neither making money nor losing money, Xiangtong is neither busy nor idle every day, but is relatively calm. Liang Chaoguan saw that the famously arrogant Xiangtong acted like a gourd again, and asked suspiciously, Xiangtong, since you hate Qin Shanju so much, why did you stay? Once you leave, wouldn't it be out of sight? Don't worry. Xiangtong was silent for a moment, then said sullenly, stay here and sharpen your Dao heart. Liang Chaoguan patted Xiangtong on the shoulder, laughed and said, facing the difficulties ascending to the climate. Xiangtong glanced sideways at Liang Chaoguan, who was close to him, and the latter withdrew his palm resentfully. Only then did Xiangtong ask, what level of aptitude do these children belong to among the youngest generation of Taoist priests in our Taofu mountain? Bai Feng staggered her hands and fingers, straightened her waist and stretched her waist. She was really too lazy to answer such an idiotic but sweet question. Liang Chaoguan said with a smile, after all, it is the fairy seedlings selected by the Dali Song family with the power of the whole country. It is not difficult to exchange them with us and become the direct disciples of the members of the ancestors of the peaks. 1 or 2 with the best qualifications, better luck, enter after gaining the Dharma eye of a certain patriarch, earning his disciples and cultivating Taoism for 100 years. Maybe he is the second Libiu of the Feishan Palace on a certain peak? Libiu was helpless. Although he was in Feishan Palace, Liang Chaoguan was in Iho Peak of Taofu Mountain in his ancestral court. There are 4 sects in one mountain and countless Taoist priests. Any intersection, but I have heard about Liang Chaoguan for a long time. After all, he is a genius who went to Yunmeng Cave to practice with his real skills. In addition to cultivating Taoism, according to the Zongman's internal reports and some rumors, Liang Chaoguan is a very serious Taoist priest. Law, but also to practice the sword. It seems that there is no such words to escape. The girl in the sable hat checked the progress of those little melon skins. She looked displeased, frowned, and was not very satisfied. She clearly taught the Taoist formula seriously, and explained every step carefully. Why is it still useless? He slammed around like a fly, but he just cursed a few times, but it seemed that his preaching skills were not good enough. Xiago insisted on a few words of encouragement, intending to let a certain general priest teach it several times according to the outline he made. Stupid, maybe the negative and the negative can be positive, but it will have a miraculous effect. Xiago glanced at Bai Feng's chest. The ermine hat girl didn't say anything, just shook her head, sighed and left. Liang Chaoguan lowered his voice and asked, Miss Xia, what do you mean? Lu Biu dare not express his opinion on this kind of issue. Xiangtong said bluntly, I find it cumbersome. Lu Biu said, Miss Xia is not easy. Liang Chaoguan echoed, unfathomable. Bai Feng sneered and said, drink the wine and understand. Xiang Tong, who was born in Hebei Peak, had the highest realm, and in fact his vision was also the highest. He hesitated to speak but still didn't express his conjecture. Xiago, who looks like a girl, is very likely to be a swordsman whose swordsmanship is far superior to me. Yes. The second enshrinement of Luo Bashan, Xiang Tong firmly believed in her so-called cutting off the old throne. I heard that she also has a Taoist companion called Xiaoma. If there is no accident, she will also be a sword fairy. Liang Chaoguan clasped the back of his head with his hands and sighed. I really don't know how Mr. Qin gathered them together. Except for Zhongtu Shenzhou, each continent is either a nominal Taoist master like Tianjun Qizhen and Xiashi, or a mountain leader like Jing Hao with infinite scenery. But if you really want to calculate the size of the territory, the vastness of the four seas outside of Jiuzhou is far from being comparable to the mountains and rivers of a certain continent. In addition to the high-ranking and powerful Mrs. Dan Dan, who is in charge of land and water transportation, the new lord of the four seas, Zhu, the true dragon king of the East China Sea, Li Yeho, the of the South China Sea, Jiao Yue, Lu Roshi, Biyuan of the West Sea, and Wei Tianting, the of the North Sea, Hong Yun. The undersea mansion of Mr. Dong Hai. Recently, the purple air in the mansion is rising, and the weather is grand, forming a huge vortex on the sea surface. The generals and soldiers of the water mansion have to patrol around to enforce martial law. Unless they hold a special certificate issued by the inspection department, everything has nothing to do with others and is unreliable. Close. Today there are 24 divisions set up within the jurisdiction of the water mansion, dotted all over the place, like the imperial city of a secular dynasty, occupying a boundary of thousands of miles, guarding this central Miyagi. Outside the 9-foot-tall vermilion lacquer gate in the blue jade square, an old man in a green shirt with his hands behind his back appeared out of nowhere. It's resplendent and majestic, it can scare people. A general in golden armor holding an iron spear lightly poked the ground with the bottom of the spear, and asked in a deep voice, Who is coming? Please tell us your identity quickly. The old man turned a deaf ear to it and just looked up at the uneven plaques. Another high-ranking of the water mansion came to the door, followed by a group of elite warriors with clanking iron armor. The uninvited guest who didn't know how to cross the many passes still didn't look at the group of priests and soldiers of the water palace. The general stretched out his hand to hold the handle of the knife and reminded, It is a felony to trespass on the water palace. The old man looked away, bored, yawned, and said with a smile, I have to suppress the realm so as not to scare you to death. It is very hard. Saber God General took a step forward. You're still playing tricks. If you don't report your name, don't blame Ben General for taking you to the water prison. The old man in green shirt said, Okay, I have nothing to talk to you guys. Let that Wang Zhu get out and meet the old man. The general is going to activate the water mansion formation and mobilize one of the water veins to smash at this old fellow who speaks out loud. As a result, the high-ranking general was horrified to find that the water vein belonging to one of the water mansion formations was completely out of control. The old man said to himself, That's right, how dare she show up in front of me? A torrential rain, the rain that splits into the four seas, is not uncommon. The little girl's film luck is good, let her take the first step and get away with it. Indeed, in terms of luck, compared with this evil dragon who survived the catastrophe, how many Li Yihis are different? Dominant. So she dared not see me even more. A priestess from the etiquette department hurried over with a respectful expression, but she hesitated to speak. How to address each other is really difficult. The one who came was Qin Qinglu, the dragon slayer. The old man said, "Hey, finally there is someone who is not blind." The chief of the etiquette department bestowed a blessing. "I have seen Chen Xianjun." Chen Qinglu nodded and said with a smile, "Wang Zhu has made up his mind not to go out to entertain guests?" The female officer looked embarrassed. Just now, King Zhu of Water made a decree, roughly meaning to thank guests behind closed doors today. Chen Qinglu sneered, "I'm scared out of my wits." Some Shuifu generals who are determined to be the master and humiliate their ministers, even if they have already guessed the identity of the old man in green clothes, they still want to fight him. Chen Qinglu moved forward, together with the female official of the Department of Rituals. All the generals and soldiers of the Water Palace couldn't help themselves. No matter how they struggled, they still had to kneel on the ground. As if the way of heaven is slowly pressing down on the top, they can't help but stand still. Chen Qinglu took every step. In a large hall of the Water Mansion, the Water King Zhu, who was originally sitting on the dragon chair, had a distorted face, pale and colorless, and his hands that were tightly covering the handle of the chair began to tremble. When Chen Qinglu entered the Water Mansion and got closer and closer to the main hall, Wang Zhu, who had reached the 14th realm, still didn't even dare to think of leaving the dragon chair. When Chen Qinglu was strolling in the courtyard, he came to the threshold of the main hall. Inside the main hall, Zhu, the king of the 14th realm, no longer has a human form, but a giant snow-white dragon is entrenched. The gigantic body of a real dragon, even though it tried its best to curl up, still occupied half of the wide and deep hall. Chen Qinglu still had his hands behind his back. His expression was as usual, but there was a bit more irony in his eyes. He raised one foot, stepped on the threshold and said, slightly stronger than before, "Just hiding, not running." The snow-white dragon slowly raised its head to a height of more than 10 feet. It was just such a small movement which seemed to consume all its energy. It's staring at that. Butcher. Blood feud, but that's all. Chen Qinglu smiled and said, "Aren't you desperate? You're already in the 14th realm, but after seeing me, you find it's so difficult for you to even raise your head? After a sliver of hope is shattered, it's probably true despair." Wang Zhu was in a daze, maintaining his true spirit, and said hoarsely, "If you kill me, you will also fall. Confucian Temple rules? It is destined to be unable to stop this dragon slayer." Moreover, Wang Zhu would never beg for mercy with the Confucian Temple. Chen Qinglu sneered and said, "The world today is different from the past, and there is still a lack of real dragons? After killing one Wang Zhu, there will naturally be a second one to make up for it. Some are busy. In the battle of killing the dragon 3,000 years ago, there were no real dragons in the world. A Liju cave was created out of thin air. Chen Qinglu retired and disappeared without a trace. But even if he didn't show up again for 3,000 years, there is still no dragon species in the world who dares to cross the Thunder Pool. I was just passing by and came here as a guest, but what you said is not pleasant." Chen Qinglu smiled and said, "Then take this head of yours and try to sharpen the edge of a long sword that has been sharpened for 3,000 years? The pair of golden eyes of this real snow-white dragon showed obvious hesitation, and the two dragon whiskers swayed slowly, rippling with bursts of pure golden light. Chen Qinglu has an unknown Taoist name, Qingzhu. This dragon slayer possessed a more concealed single-word flying sword. But it wasn't like this from the very beginning, but the sword cultivator used battle to nourish the battle, tempered the sword edge and polished it out bit by bit. Fijian's natal supernatural power is just one word. Cut. Chen Qinglu stretched out his hand to grab it, and the infinite sea water in the boundary of Shuifu dried up in an instant, and finally condensed into a long blue sword. Standing up the long sword, Chen Qinglu put his fingers together, flicked it lightly. The blade vibrated and trembled endlessly. Wang Zhu was already very reluctant to resist the aura that was like the coercion of heaven, but she absolutely refused to kill her, raised her claws and pressed heavily on the ground of the hall. Chen Qinglu shook his head. "You guys are in the new 14th realm, you are so weak that it is ridiculous." Wang Zhu was so suppressed that he lost his real body and regained his human form, bleeding from his 7 orifices, curled up on the dragon chair. Just at this moment Chen Qinglu was about to step over the threshold and bestow the sword on that poor fellow, when he suddenly stopped and cursed, "Old man, you likes to be troublesome." It turned out that there was a middle-aged man beside him, who also looked like a Confucian scholar in green shirt. It was Chen Pingon. Chen Qinglu snorted, "Haven't the contract between you two been terminated?" Qin Pingon nodded and smiled. Unknowingly I formed the contract passively, and when I came back to my senses, I took the initiative to terminate the contract. Qin Qinglu squinted at the young mountain master and said, "Young man with Ning Yao as a Taoist companion, are you still not satisfied? Eating what's in your mouth and thinking about what's in the pot, isn't it good?" Qin Pingon didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was all about what? Want to save her? How to save her? A little nascent soul who just jumped over the fairyland on the first floor of Yupu, dares to show up here? Qin Qinglu turned around and casually shook the long sword in his hand. "Aren't we going to talk about the realm apart from the realm?" Qin Ping glanced at Wang Zhu, who was sitting on the dragon chair in the room. Wang Zhu's face was frosty and he didn't appreciate it. Holding the sword in one hand, Qin Qinglu took a step towards Qin Pingon, and said with a smile, "I don't understand, I'm very curious, how can you stop me just because we are both surnamed Qin?" Qin Ping made a bow and said, "Boldly beg Senior to withdraw his sword." Wang Zhuping was furious for no reason and screamed, "Don't beg him. When you were young you asked for help, when you were young you asked for help, and now you still ask for help. My Wang Zhu is already in the 14th realm, and the luck of the dragons in the world is condensed in me. Since life and death are conceded, don't you need to meddle in your own business?" Qin Ping squinted at the hall and said angrily, "Shut up you." Wang Zhu trembled with anger. Qin Qinglu reminded with a smile, "Qin Ping, think it over, today is my enemy, the price is not small and the sequelae are even greater." Qin Ping's eyes were firm and he said slowly, "About Wang Zhu, Mr. Qi has something to entrust. I need to be her guardian at least once. At least from the current point of view, Wang Zhu, who left Lizhu Dongtian, did not take any act of arrogance. There is no need to hand over the sword to kill the dragon." "Oh." Qin Qinglu twitched the corners of his mouth. "Qi Jingchun told you personally?" Qin Pingon shook his head and said, "Mr. Qi doesn't need to say it." Qin Qinglu smiled and said, "The immortal realm, it's too useless. Why don't you call the old scholar to come over and make the paste? I also have a suggestion, it's best to bring Li Xing with you." Qin Pingon was silent. Qin Qinglu waited patiently for a moment, then sneered, "How can a person live such a pitiful life?" Shaking his head, Qin Qinglius' wrist trembled, and the long sword was scattered into sea water. "I don't want to bully a junior, just treat it as if you owe me a sword, questioning in the same realm." Qin Qinglu glanced at Wang Zhu and jokingly said, "Twice for saving lives, you can't promise twice with your body? I can help guard the door." Wang Zhu tremblingly raised an arm, lowered his head, and wiped the blood on his face with the sleeve of his dragon robe. Qin Qinglu put his hands behind his back and said, "Qin Xianxia, walk with me?" Qin Pingon nodded. Qin Qinglius' first question was unexpected. In the Great Wall of Sword Qi, has Qin Qing ever commented on the level of swordsmanship? Qin Pingon said truthfully, "The boss sword fairy never mentioned senior." Qin Qinglu rubbed his chin. "It really makes people angry." Qin Ping smiled. Qin Pingon asked curiously, "I have something to ask. Did Zhou Zi ever target you in the way of cultivation, senior?" Qin Qinglu laughed and said, "I don't like being nosy when I'm full. Besides, I can't become a pure swordsman at the 15th level, I'm not pure enough." Qin Qinglu changed the question again. "I've just mastered water swordsmanship. What do you think is the difference between me and Qin Qingdu?" Qin Pingon said, "Leaving aside the killing power, each has its own merits in the way of swordsmanship. Besides, the gap in swordsmanship is not small. Even if each is perfect, the circle is divided into big and small." Qin Qinglu nodded without saying a word but turned around. In the main hall, Wang Zhu, who had just sat up, turned pale in an instant. Qin Pingon had no choice but to add, "Senior said that he was destined not to be able to become a 15th level swordsman." This junior thought it was a self-deprecating statement. The spirit of Qingzhu, who came out of the mountain with his sword and retreated with his sword, would never be so low. Qin Qinglu hummed. "Only talk about spirit, not achievement. It's the big truth." Two were speechless, walking side by side. Before Qin Qinglu left this East Sea mansion, he said for no reason, "So what if you have reached the peak of the world in practice, but you are the least free? Establishing a religion and calling it an ancestor, you will feel that the world is narrow." After saying these words, Qin Qinglu went to the wild world through a passage to return to the ruins. Qin Ping just wanted to travel far away with Yu Jian, so he continued on his way. Wang Zhu, who had recovered as usual, came to him. After all, he is a 14th realm in his own dojo. Qin Pingon said, I was able to get the opportunity to become a sword holder back then. What I did and thought is not the real key. In the final analysis, it is because of Mr. Qi's trust in me. Wang Zhu pursed his lips. Qin Ping said calmly, whether they are here or not, don't let those who give us hope down. Wang Zhu bit his lip. Qin Ping put his arms around his sleeves. As long as you never disappoint Mr. Qi, I am asking as senior not to use the sword today, and I don't need to ask in the future. Wang Zhu turned to look at this former neighbor and she slowly raised her hand. Qin Pingon moved a few steps sideways in an instant, his expression full of alertness. After all, there are 2 realms behind. But Wang Zhu just narrowed his eyes and stroked his temple hair. Qin Ping tipped his toes, and the sword light left the water mansion like a rainbow. In the peaceful world, the earth is always spring, and the countryside is full of smoke from cooking. Some guests come from the west, and their clothes are still covered with apricot blossom rain. On Luopa Mountain, an old man dressed in a Taoist robe and a gourd scoop around his waist came this day. He was dusty and carried a piano bag. Old Immortal Jia just happened to come to drink tea at this table today, and catch up with the Taoist priest Xianwei who has now been promoted to the head of a mountain. The visitor claimed to be a Lushan Taoist Hong Qingxian named Yu Jian. Because I didn't think about mountain climbing, I didn't register with Taoist Xianwei. The old Taoist was more talkative, and said he was good at playing the qin made by Lei Shi. He met an equally talkative old fairy Jia and they had a good conversation. The old Taoist took off the piano bag and showed his hand. Jia Xing was full of admiration and commented on a sincere sentence from the bottom of his heart. It is true, it is clear, there is no smoke and the meaning is beyond the world. In fact, there are often qi practitioners like Hong Qingxian who pretend to pass by the foot of the mountain. It's just that there are not many people who dare to sit at the table like the old Taoist priest. Hong Qingxian drank tea, hit it off with that old fairy Jia, stepped on the watermelon rind and chatted wherever he went, chatting, just rushing, now talking about his friend. It is considered that his official career has been smooth, and he once served as a minister of the Ministry of Rights of a country. Old Immortal Jia sees through but doesn't tell, making friends out of thin air. Hong Qingxian continued, Pin Dao met him when he was young, when he was the secretary, and he met this arrogant young man who was the third guard. Old Immortal Jia asked tentatively, Kijiaguan? Hong Qingxian nodded with a smile and revealed his shortcomings. It is indeed an official from the family. He is the secretary who writes books when he gets on the bus, and what is in his body is the secretary. Jia Xing stroked his beard and smiled and said, Dao is from a friendly family background, so it's no wonder that his speech and behavior are so elegant and natural. Hong Qingxian continued to tell the story of that friend. After becoming minister of the Ministry of Rights, he had a suggestion with His Majesty the Emperor that it is a good thing for a ruler in charge of a country and a minister who governs a country to be devout and faithful to the Buddha. But he should not blindly flatter the Buddha. If the blood of the common people is exhausted for the altar, the Buddha, if he has a spirit, would not be willing to make offerings. If one loses the treasury, misses the agricultural work and wastes the people's power to get the blessing, then the blessing will be greater than the blessing that is prayed for. Practicing Buddhism can cultivate the capital of the next life. Confucianism's cultivation of qi and jiping is to solve today's problems. The second monarch changed his course and began to advocate Taoism, and turned to destroy temples and Buddhas. It was still the old man who had just been conferred the title of Crown Prince in Taibao, who openly opposed the emperor's extermination of Buddhism and worship of Taoism. The reason is that it is wrong to say that today is near and the next life is far away. Then the next life is far away, today is near, just look at the light of today day. It is also wrong not to look at the afterlife in this body. Some people in the ruling and opposition circles said that he was trying to gain fame and reputation, and that he would not be guaranteed at the end of the day. Only a few people think that he is truly mellow. Speaking of this, the old Taoist raised his withered palm and patted the piano bag on the table lightly. From young to old, we are all close friends, but he became an official, a poor Taoist cultivator, and it is inevitable that he will gradually drift away. No more books, times have changed, old places revisiting, the previous years were blown away by the rain and the wind, the old friend's house was overgrown with weeds, the old wood was thin and tough, and the branches were like tendons. There is only one ancient begonia, which is still graceful and graceful, like a peerless beauty who admires herself alone. Old Immortal Jia sighed endlessly and followed up, I don't know how many times I have passed out drunk in the shadow of flowers. Xianxia picked up the water bowl and said sadly, there is no solution. Jiaxing was not very willing to comment on this matter, so he just picked up the bowl and bumped into Xianxia. At this moment the young Taoist priest sitting on the bamboo chair suddenly said, there is a solution. Xianxia turned his head and asked with a smile, what's the explanation? Xianwei replied, if you want to be powerless, you will resign from office and retire to the mountains and forests. This kind of high morale and integrity, the family members and grandchildren have seen it, and the government and the people have seen it. They all know that there is still something in the world. Scholars read books in this way, so it is right of. It's really helpless. It's hard to change the situation from turbid to clear, and I have to pretend to be false and join forces with people who don't believe in the same way, but I do my best, mend it in secret, and do a lot of good things that benefit the people in the country, and outsiders scold me as I please. If you scold me, your fame will be ruined once, but you have a clear conscience, so this is also right. Two kinds of things, two people, two hearts have never failed, and they have really taken root and will bloom and bear fruit in the hearts of others. They may not be lush, but like that crabapple. Hearing this, the old man thought about it for a moment and sighed, so that's how it is. Taoist Xianwei smiled and said nothing. Sure enough, I can't discuss the details of Taoism in the teaching with others, and speaking these general Taoist language is what I am good at. The last time I made a show for Li Muzhou of the Jingwei Temple, now Xianwei is afraid when he meets a true Taoist priest. It was still hard to muster up the courage to say a few words. Of course, the main reason is that Taoist Xianwei is not worried about saying the wrong thing because of the presence of the old Jia who sits at the gate of the mountain. But do as the Romans do, you still have to treat people with sincerity. Xianwei wanted to strike while the iron was hot and add a few more words, but he couldn't think of a good way to say it for a while, so he hinted at the master of this way at the table, the great master with his eyes. Old Immortal Jia immediately understood. It was his duty to do his duty, and immediately followed up with a few sincere words. The truth is such a big truth. People of course can't be vulgar, but they can't be unconventional at all. If you really want to make these empty truths come true, as the Taoist Xianwei said, it's like sprouting, blossoming and bearing fruit, or letting a sapling grow like a tree. Big and straight, one day it is expected to tower to the sky, and it can shade relatives, neighbors and passers-by. We have to be the lord of the mountain to dismantle the great principles in detail. Xianwei admired it very much. Probably this means that experts can know if there is one as soon as they make a move, and they are indeed a bit better than themselves. Xianxia put down the white bowl. Since old Immortal Jia is willing to treat people with sincerity, it is not good for Pindao to continue to use a false identity. In fact, Pindao's Taoist name is Kongshan, and the ashram houses are called cocoons. Jiaxing asked, burning incense and sitting quietly an empty mountain alone? A cocoon that binds itself? Xianxia nodded and said, Pindao used to dig a well to make alchemy in a small place called Chuanjiao Mountain. He practiced for many years. Unfortunately, he was not talented enough, and the Tao of longevity misled me. The old Taoist patted the gourd ladle on his waist and said with a hearty smile, I usually make some wine by myself, which is not bad, but the poor Taoist failed the good wine. The Daoist wronged me in the wrong wine, so it's even. Jiaxing raised his bowl, replaced wine with tea and sighed. A Taoist walks the way, meets mountains and lives in mountains, meets water and stops water and walks like a god. At the gate of the mountain there were only 3 of them anyway, and they were all Taoist priests. If you praise the 2 of them, you can also praise yourself, by the way. Xianxia, whose Dao name is Kongshan, stood up, and the thin old man put his piano bag back on his back again and said with a smile, it's ridiculous to say, when the poor Daoist first entered the mountain to practice, he was young and frivolous, he didn't know the heights of the sky, and he looked down on the world. 3 mountains, 1 people. The old Taoist continued to wander alone. Old Immortal Jia didn't take today's encounter too seriously, but just performed normally at an average level. When Qin Ping crossed the sea with his sword all the way, boarded the land of Aquarius continent, and entered the boundary of Beiyue, he asked Wei Shenjun to help him and returned to Luopa Mountain in an instant. At the gate of the mountain, Qin Pingon said with a smile after hearing a general idea from the old fairy Jia, it seems that I missed a worldly expert. Jiaxing helped to revise a sentence, miss each other, let's leave. Cui Zhongzhu has sent a letter with flying sword, telling me Xianxia not to forget to return to his sect on time. Mi Xiefeng is going to start the magic mirror, Everything is ready, only Chief Mi is left. Jiang Shangzhen, who was a teacher in that village school, even abducted a few Mongolian children from neighboring villages to study in his own village school. He felt that his skill in enlightenment and teaching had surpassed that of Qin Shanzhu. In the Jumping Fish Mountain, Master Wen, who can't be shaken to sleep, take a bath, change clothes and sit on the bench to bask in the sun every day. No matter his skin is itchy, he still feels that he is doing well again. One day he even took the initiative to ask Pei Qian, who only gave 1 punch a day, to raise his realm to the limit. After Pei Qian made sure that Wen carefully wasn't joking, he punched down and there was a big hole in the wall next to the martial arts arena. Before Wen carefully passed out, he vaguely heard Master Jing say something like, "Old rules, bookkeeping, my brothers get a 20% discount." The guy named Bai Xian often came to hang out in the martial arts field. When he saw this punch, he quickly picked up the purple sand pot and drank wolfberry tea, suppressing his shock. Jing Dafeng was soft-spoken and made several oaths before he was lucky enough to read the Book of Heroes. After closing the book, Jing Dafeng said something to be fair, "It is really a book of life and death." Sitting on the bamboo chair under the eaves, Bai Xian looked at the martial arts master, whom Jing Dafeng said was weak in body but not weak in spirit. "Mature, just wait for yourself to throw a cup for the sake of reason. Brother Wen can be the vanguard general when besieging Pei Qian together. How did Wen Xianxia know the way here, let alone the matter of being exceptionally listed in the eyes of Master Jing, who sees through and doesn't tell the truth? It is considered to be laying on the floor at the gate of hell. In any case, this kid Bai Xian has a weird personality, a bit weird, old-fashioned in speaking and doing things, but besides Master Jing, he is the second member of the Luobashan genealogy who recognizes him, so we sit in rows together under the eaves on weekdays. Warmly, if you are careful, you are willing to chat with Bai Xian a few more words. Especially when he learned that Bai Xian was already a hidden sword cultivator at the Dragon Gate level at such a young age. When Xianxia was more willing to talk warmly with him, and Jing Dafeng held back his words. Be bad, be happy secretly. The two were on Jilin Peak and they only knew how to eat and drink all day long. I don't know who made a small report. They filed a complaint with Qin Shanzhu and they were driven to Taoyu Mountain. They didn't go to the martial arts arena on the other side of Yingyu Peak in Taoyu Mountain to help, but in Huayin Peak, Mi Daijian used flying swords to poke the embryos of those cultivators randomly, and Zhou Xian, who was a martial artist with a golden body, was just like that. Arrow target, let those 8 chi refiners mess up smashing technique. The sable hat girl, who seemed to be the top spot, and the chief master was more satisfied. It was a mess, just look at the excitement. But they don't go to Huayin Peak often and there is no point of view. Those who fish for 3 days and hang nets for 2 days, as long as no one urges them, they will resolutely not go. Zhou Xian wanted to make that Gontang worshipper work harder, so she urged the old man to settle down at Huayin Peak, so as not to have to jump back and forth between Yushan Mountain and sword-worshipping platform. The old deaf child laughed and said nothing. I am called Lao Deaf, I am not an old fool. In addition to Fuyao, Qin Pingon set up a cloud nest formation in Jumping Fish Mountain. Before that, it was obvious that Qin Shanzhu didn't want Meili to have too much interaction with this group of outsiders, who strictly belonged to the unnamed disciples of Luopa Mountain. But it may be a temporary change of mind. Qin Shanzhu suddenly figured out something, so Zhou Hufa's great cause of patrolling mountains is flourishing. The mountain guards of Luopa Mountain seem to have Fuyolu and Tao Yushan, these two silent and dumb capable generals. The little girl in black was wandering alone on the mountain patrol road, with no one around, a green bamboo stick threatening and a small pole swishing. She secretly put on the cloak that the old cook tailored for her and was just the right size, and followed the instructions of Goodman Mountain. The method taught by the Lord is to stand still first, hold the corner of the cloak with 2 fingers, and then shake it vigorously, swaggeringly, oh, so majestic. Between Yingyu Peak and Huayin Peak in Taoyu Mountain, there is a snow-white waterfall pouring down more than 100 feet, and there is a stone bridge shaped like a rainbow. The millet grains wearing cloaks and satchels have to stop here every time and occasionally meet with them. A colleague from Qilong Lane about this place across a bridge, the 2 sides stood facing each other. The left guardian of Qilong Lane was lying on the other side early, and the little girl in black looked solemn and nodded. When you meet on a narrow road, the brave wins, one runs wildly, the other leaps forward, there is no loser, everyone wins. Both feet landed on the ground and one stood still. The little girl in black turned around and clasped her fists. In fact, it was Gu Ken, who was an outsider from Luobashan, who persuaded Qin Pingon to change his mind. Gukan said that you want to protect Zhou Mili too much. Do you really need to be so cautious? Before Zhou Mili met you in that dumb lake, did she have a guardian? If you are so cautious in your home's desolate mountain world, don't you underestimate your own mountain guards? Today the little girl in black is still wearing a cloak with her arms folded around her chest, holding a green bamboo stick and a golden pole. Standing in the middle of the stone bridge, she looks up at the waterfall. He looked serious and frowned. It turned out that Sister Xiago suggested that she show her real body yesterday, stay in the pool, drink water with her mouth wide open, to be precise, catch the waterfall and see if she can drink enough water. So Zhou Mili seriously considered whether this proposal is feasible or not, and if someone accidentally saw it, it would be embarrassing or not. A warm palm was pressed on the head and Zhou Mili tilted his head. Hey, it turned out to be the good mountain master. Qin Pingon told her the idea and reason why he set up the cloud nest. Zhou Mili scratched his face. What did I think? What a big deal. Walking along the mountain road leisurely together, Qin Pingon borrowed the green bamboo stick, and the little girl in black carried the golden pole on her shoulder. The trekking stick poked down on the bluestone slab, making an aggressive sound. Millet raised her palm and placed a pile of melon seeds. While nibbling melon seeds, Qin Pingon complained, "It's not easy to practice Taoism and I'm busy with general affairs. I owe a lot of debts of favor and study. Far and near there are so many things big and small. The old cook has a backlog of all kinds of letters on the desk. I worry about whether I can reply to the letter or how to write the reply letter." It was the first time for the nagging and disgruntled Qin Shanju to tell others what was in his heart. One big and one small, working together, finished nibbling the melon seeds, and the little ones clenched their fists and handed them to Qin Pingon. Qin Pingon didn't know what to do, but he still spread his palms and asked with a smile, "What?" Zhou Mili grinned and said, "I have saved a lot of fun and I will borrow some from the good Shanju." One loosens his fist and the other clenches it. Qin Pingon shook his fist, indicating that he had received it, and asked with a smile, "Isn't it a gift?" Zhou Mili nodded vigorously, "I only borrow it, not give it away." Qin Pingon smiled and narrowed his eyes, "Doesn't it still count as interest?" Mili shook her head, laughed and said, "It must." Qin Ping suddenly said, "Good deal." When they came on the road, under the sunlight, a rainbow hung over the waterfall. Sword of Coming Chapter 1129. The fastest update of Jianlai. The Yulin ferry has been expanding to facilitate the docking of more large ferries like Tongyin, so as to turn a temporary ferry into a permanent ferry. I heard that the Yunyan Kingdom's imperial court has outsourced the government-run vinegar, barley wine and ink making. Some bold young people from the capital fished here at night. Not far away were colorful boats filled with the scent of fat and powder, and people were drinking and drinking. The hosts were mostly dignitaries from the mountains, and they were here to entertain the immortal masters on the mountain. What they enjoyed was the moonlight, what they talked about was friendship, what they drank was gold and silver, and the people at the wine table called each other brothers, both of whom were named Xian. The teenagers by the river whispered, saying that the few colorful boats that could be opened for business here belonged to which royal relatives and the princes of which official seals. The teenagers occasionally saw a woman coming with staggering steps. Beside the boat rail, she took out a handkerchief to wipe the corners of her mouth and tidied up her makeup. She hesitated again, and instead of putting the handkerchief into her sleeves, she threw it away and hurried back to the feasting place. Now everyone in the government and the public knows that the owner of Tongyin Ferry is an immortal mansion with the prefix Song. In addition, the court also has martial law, and no idlers are allowed to approach Tongyin Ferry and disturb the repairs of the Sword Immortals. Therefore, Tongyin Ferry, the nearby body of water, is relatively quiet. Occasionally, a small boat approaches this place, and soon, like a wild bird scurrying out of the reeds, a warrior is performing Qing Kung Fu. A dragonfly touches the water, reminding the small boat to turn around and leave. The warrior curses in his heart, turns back, lowers his head and bends his waist, raising his breath to tread the water. Floating like a feather, walking on the flat ground, I wanted to go to the shore quietly. On the way, I saw two people on the other side of the boat railing looking towards me. A man in a green shirt with a warm expression, a long-bearded Taoist, holds a sword on his back. The martial artist was startled and quickly stopped and bowed to apologize to the two unfamiliar-looking immortal masters on the boat. The man in green shirt actually smiled and clasped his fists in return. This made the martial artist who had recently eaten and leisurely at Yulindu stunned. Must be right, Fang's realm is not high and his status is average. It's just that the martial artist can't help but wonder, how can he get to the Tongyin Ferry with an ordinary status? The entire territory of Yunyan Kingdom's Jiangyi province is loose on the outside and tight on the inside. As the most important Yulin crossing, some colleagues joked that even if a dog pooped on the side of the Yulin crossing, whoever stepped on it would have to report it to the court for record. Lu Yen smiled and said, "Why didn't you recognize your identity?" Qin Pingon said helplessly, "I heard from Dongshan that the Yunyan Kingdom's court may have wanted to express their gratitude. Even the records of all the genealogy monks of the Qingping Jian sect, Yugui sect, etc. only left text and no pictures." Lu Yen joked, "It's not the ordinary accumulation of prestige." Qin Pingon didn't explain anything. In the past, any immortal mansion with the sect's head in Tongye continent was a well-deserved god, and the joy, anger, sorrow and joy of the immortal master were as clear as rain and snow. The mountains and rivers are beautiful, like a beautiful mute woman with tender feelings. The human body is floating like dust on the road, and the world is just like the ripples of water. Lu Yen continued the previous topic and said, "I will try not to delay Shanju Chen's practice time too much." Qin Pingon said, "Protecting the Tao is not cultivating the Tao." When a Taoist comes out of the mountain, in addition to gaining experience in the world of mortals and sharpening his Taoist heart, he also does nothing more than seek out immortal fate, collect heavenly materials and earthly treasures, accumulate merit and increase his Taoist power. There are also 3 external affairs. Although they are done occasionally, they are of great importance. For example, the first one is to guard the gate for others, such as Yao Qing, the national master of the Qingshan dynasty, guarding the gate for the ghost Su Jun. The next step is to save people and lead them up the mountain. To put it more bluntly, it means going out to find Taoist embryos, accepting them as disciples, strengthening the sect and continuing the Taoist lineage. Then it's about helping people protect the road. For example, in the Ohua Blessed Land, Jiang Shangzhen transformed into Zhou Fei of Spring Chao Palace in order to help Lu Feng, a bird's-eye view peak, to break through a love barrier. Jiang Shangzhen spent a lot of time on this, but the problem was that Lu Feng, a sword cultivator, was never able to break through it. The inner demon is probably still fighting against the wall in a land of lotus flowers. According to what Chief Zhou said afterwards, if Lu Feng had been willing to enter the Jade Gui sect in his early years, there would be no need to go to the Ohua Blessed Land. The strong melon is not sweet, but to quench his thirst, it's a pity that Lu Feng's elm not just didn't wake up and he had to hang himself from a tree. Previously at the Fiolu private dojo, the old temple master had 2 comments about Sun Yuan, who was half a neighbor, one derogatory and the other praising. One line is that he disliked Sun Yuan for not being broad-minded enough and was one of the main culprits that led to the collapse of Izhou. What's the point of cultivating Taoism? It's just a private plan. The shortcomings of Tongyi's Hao are shared by Sun and Du. Another compliment, the evaluation is not low. Disciples like Xing Juzhong and Sun Yuan, the more the better. Lu Yen stroked his beard and smiled and said, "If Master Qin is so polite, then I will really have no contact with Master Qin." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "No need to see anyone outside." The reason why Lu Yen asked Qin Pingon to be his Taoist protector was of course not because Lu Yen could only find Qin Pingon. He traveled the world alone. Yun Shui had lived for 3,000 years, but Lu Yen still had several Taoist friends. Just like Master Huolong who came to Tongyi's Hao with him this time, he is a good friend who has been in love for many years. However, as Master Huolong himself said, guarding the gates is worry-free and labor-saving. Pindao is still in a good state now, so he will do his duty and never give up. Don't shirk, but when it comes to the hard work of protecting the Tao, we have to change it. The poor Taoist's ability to be patient is really not that good. Someone on the mountain once made an analogy. Helping people guard the gates is a short-term job, while protecting people's roads is a long-term job. Qin Pingon said, "I hope the result will be a battle to protect the Tao. The younger generation will not have any merit, but will have a small amount of hard work." Lu Yen smiled knowingly. As expected, it couldn't be better. The implication beyond the language is very good. The easier it is for Qin Pingon to protect the Tao, the less he has to personally participate in the situation, and the less effort he has to do. It naturally means that Lu Yan's practice will be smoother. Lu Yan suggested, "Shan Master Qin might as well just use one clone to enter that blessed place. It's probably enough." Qin Pingon didn't dare to make a conclusion on how to enter there. He said, I know very little about that place. Do the seniors have detailed files similar to Jishu? It's better for the juniors to do their homework early. Lu Yen shook his head and said, I only have some hearsay information, so I can't give much inside information. I only know that because it is a first-class cave in a middle-class blessed land, there has always been a saying that it is top-heavy. The access control is extremely strict and there are many passes. Pin Dao was able to go there to experience, and it was only through the mediation of the Holy Master that he was able to open up the net. The Holy Master also made it clear to Pin Dao that making exceptions would come with a price. But what is the price? The Holy Master not clear. He said that he just wanted Pin Dao to think carefully before making a decision. Qin Pingon secretly weighed it in his heart. A middle-grade blessed land? Does it mean that the number of qi refiners is not too large and the level is limited? During the study tour, Li Baoping discussed similar issues with Cui Dongshan. At that time, the boy in white smiled playfully and asked the little girl in red cotton-padded jacket a question. Have you ever bought hot tofu from the roadside stall in that market? It turns out that in the eyes of mathematicians who are proficient in mathematics, the total amount of the aura of heaven and earth and the destiny of a dynasty is one of a certain quota, whether it is as large as the vast world or as small as any blessed land. Therefore, every martial artist becomes a martial arts master, and a monk achieves the realm of immortality by cutting tofu on a chopping board. First come, first served. The weight of the tofu cubes is the level of achievement. Li Baoping's next question caught the carefree Cui Dongshan a little off guard. Do you have to pay to cut off a piece of tofu? The price for buying tofu is determined by everyone and the stall owner. Is there any discount? Qin Pingon asked a key question. Senior, do you know who has the final say in that cave? Lu Yen hesitated for a moment and said, the founders of the three religions only established some rules at first and did not interfere in specific affairs. I heard that there are only a few people who are actually in charge, each with his own name. The battle to the sky changed the world, and some of them from ancient times, the gods such as Ant Feng, were able to retain their status as gods. Later mountain monks only knew that the passages for these gods to and from the human world were mostly on the top of the mountain where the ancestral palaces of military strategists from various continents were. But where they live, or rather are imprisoned, has always been subject to some speculation. After all, it is impossible for the founders of the three religions to let these gods scatter in the sky. Otherwise Zhoumi will go to the sky to attract the gods to their places, causing all the avenues to gradually collapse and human beings will be destroyed. The time has long been in chaos, not to mention the smooth weather. I am afraid that even the bright and different roads and the changing of the seasons have become a luxury. The founders of the three religions, let alone blocking the door with their Taoist bodies, should be forced to disperse and mend the vacancies in those avenues. As for this group of ancient gods as well as the new batch of gods who were born along with the four worlds, their golden bodies were fixed on the cloud, where the cave, heaven and blessed land were connected. That's why Lu Yen said, there are strict rules over there. Qin Pingon changed the topic and asked, Senior, you have traveled around the world of Qingming. What is your biggest impression? Lu Yen smiled and said, the color of the blue sky over there can be said to be green and dripping, as if it is really about to drip onto the earth. Qin Pingon nodded and said, it's like the glaze color of a certain kind of porcelain in my hometown. If I have a chance, I'd like to see the different scenery there. Lu Yen waved the whisk lightly and said with a smile, I met a stranger in a certain mountain before who said that the invisible time between heaven and earth was smelted from the fragments of the golden body. Qin Pingon asked, what is smelting? Lu Yen said, incense. Qin Pingon thought for a moment and said, wonderful idea. Lu Yen said, this gentleman also said that dreams are one of the incense burners. Qin Pingon shook his head and said, it's unbelievable. Lu Yen took out an inconspicuous yellow silk bag from his sleeve, handed it to Qin Pingon, and briefly explained the situation inside the bag. There are about 10 items each in a small bag. Loading in addition to the 5-color soil from Haoran and Qingming Diyue. There are also several. This is a magic weapon that is not very valuable, but not very common either. Shanzhu Qin can take stock of it himself later. Just think of it as the reward for protecting the road next time. Qin Pingon stretched out his hand and gently pushed the bag back and politely declined, no reward will be given for no merit. When one day in the future the merits of protecting the Tao are accomplished, it will not be too late for seniors to discuss this matter. It's just a deposit. The future share will be calculated separately. Lu Yen handed the bag to Qin Pingon and said with a smile. On the way here Master Huolong said that it is best to give gifts, especially gifts to Master Chen. They are sent in separate pieces which shows more courtesy and affection. It is too stupid for poor people. No need to bother. Qin Pingon put the bag into his sleeve and gave a Taoist ceremony to Master Chunyang. Master Huolong laughed and said, counting money, staring at a solitary ingot of silver on the table is not as fun as looking at a pile of copper coins. Cui Dongshan's little chicken pecked at the rice and said, it's so, a grain rain coin, how can there be a pile of snow coins like a hill to look happy at? Pei Qian said, there is a premium between Guyu money and Xiaoshu money when converted into snow money. Master is pragmatic and not unrealistic, so he will definitely choose the former. Cui Dongshan pretended to be suddenly enlightened. He took out a folding fan from nowhere and struck his palm. I missed the chess piece. It seems that the senior sister understands the gentleman better. As he spoke, Cui Dongshan glanced at the bag from the corner of his eye. Cui Dongshan reminded his husband in his heart, the most valuable thing is that bag. Master Huolong said in his heart, the 5 elements natal items you have are of good quality. This is quite impressive. This Taoist friend from Chunyang likes to travel to famous mountains and rivers the most. The things he gives are in contrast to each other in the 5 elements. It may be a little too much to say that it is a help in times of need, but it is the icing on the cake. Gifts are an understatement. Return to the mountain dojo and refine it carefully. I believe it will be of great benefit and help you to reach a higher level in the immortal realm. It is not difficult at all. This is what an expert will do. Then you will know if there is. Master Huolong hesitated for a moment, but still didn't point out something. In fact, the reward Qin Pingon should really ask for is to have a good discussion with Master Chunyang and ask for some Taoist mental methods that are traditional secrets from the family. Meeting I met Taoist Chunyang, but if you don't discuss Taoism and talk about the golden elixir, what's the difference between entering Baoshan and returning empty-handed? To put it bluntly, this guy is so thin-skinned that he is so scrupulous about this and other taboos when doing business with others. Qin Pingon and Lu Yen returned to the wine table. Xiego had just told Cui Dongshan about the Taoist embryo and let Cui sect leader decide whether to take her up the mountain. Unexpectedly, Cui Dongshan revealed the family background, Taoist name, sect and other family treasures of the female cultivator and fellow Taoists. Xiego was puzzled and asked him if he had already taken a fancy to the woman's basic qualifications. Cui Dongshan laughed loudly and said that he did not have the ability to predict the future or open his eyes, but he was still well informed. The dozen or so people in his group arrived in the capital earlier than you and your husband. They had nothing to do and often walked around. People from various government offices looked through the official documents of the Ministry of Justice, glanced at them a few times and remembered them. I was not paying attention at first and almost missed this big omission. Xianxia, don't worry, since it is a talent recommended by Xianxia personally, he and Qingping Sword Sect will definitely focus on cultivating him. Cui Dongshan curiously asked about Xiego. Didn't he think about the day he would found a mountain sect? Xiego was not interested. He said that he had direct disciples and a large group of disciples and disciples. They found the Kaishan dojo, established a sect and became the first sect. So what if there is a next sect? Practice should not be done by oneself but let others do it for you. What? Cui Dongshan's little chicken pecked at the rice, nodded his head and kept saying that everyone has his own ambitions, all are good, all are good. The arrival of Master Huolong was like giving Feng Shuetao a big bowl of hangover soup. Although Feng Shuetao was nervous, he was still tough and did not say a soft word. After all, he is a time-honored person who has risen to prominence, and Ai Aizhou has a bad relationship with Beiju Luzhou. It is not appropriate to show any flattery to Master Huolong, both emotionally and rationally. Besides, as a wild cultivator he still has some ability to manipulate people's hearts. Sure enough, the old master didn't take it seriously. Instead he glanced at Feng Shuetao and sat down with a smile. He drank a bowl of wine and wiped his mouth. The old master said with a kind face, "Friend Qingmi, I am a poor Taoist. I drank the fine wine but the word bei seems to have to stay. Although you Ai Aizhou, Lu Kaishan and Wei Tiankai do have 2 new ones who have been promoted to the 14th realm, You are good at everything and you are more capable of making money. It's number one in Jiuzhou, but it's not that good at all. Fighting is not an option. Feng Shuatao didn't dare to make irresponsible remarks when it came to fighting. Ai Zhou Qingmi was never among the handful of powerful people promoted by Howren. Especially after he personally walked through the wild world, Feng Zueto's mood became even lower. Cui Dongshan said from the bottom of his heart, "Brother Feng, please ask me quickly. We are also in the 14th realm. Can seniors really be able to beat 2 with 1? Feng Shuatao turned a deaf ear. Not a fool. Do you dare to ask such a question and only want to fight? Xiago didn't have any worries and asked directly, "Now that we are united, what does the world look like in your eyes?" Master Hulong twisted his beard and pondered for a moment, then said slowly, "I can't say much about the mystery here. I can only say one thing. In the eyes of a poor Taoist, the heaven and the earth are a stove, and as for you, you are just firewood." Xiago asked, "The invisible spiritual energy flowing between heaven and earth is the spark that can be used anytime and anywhere?" Master Hulong was non-committal and said with a smile, "It is quite a strange thing that my fellow Taoist has not reached the 14th level. To be worshipped as a second-rate person is to be humbled by my talents." Xiago followed the poll and asked, "Is Piety Peak short of a chief?" Master Hulong is recognized as the kind of master of chatting without landing on the subject. He can pick up any conversation and warm up any awkward situation. If Master Chen doesn't mind poaching, why not be the chief minister in name only? Xiago grinned and said, "Forget it, one girl will not marry 2 men." Master Hulong immediately said from his heart, "As long as fellow Taoist Bai Jing becomes the chief worshipper of Piety Peak, he can go to AI continent with Pindao in an honorable way." After a while, Lu Kaishan and Wei Tiankai, 2 against 2 couldn't be fairer. Moreover, the teacher has a good reputation, so as long as he doesn't get angry, it's hard for the Confucian temple to say anything. Hearing this, Xiago's eyes lit up. "Let me take the lead, let me try first and see if I can fight 2 against each other? If the opportunity is not good, will you help me?" Now how much these new 14ers weigh, Xiago is extremely curious. Master Hulong put down his wine bowl, wiped his mouth and said with a smile, "There are some things that just make you happy when you think about them. Once you are happy, that's all." Perhaps he felt that it was rare that there were no ordinary people at the wine table tonight. He eloquently recounted his practice experience. Whether it's a matter of course or it's pure luck, as long as a monk successfully reaches the 14th realm, he has found a road that is infinitely close to immortality. Then just take your time. Pure martial arts. But also there is a saying that boxing is afraid of young people. But Taoists approaching the top of the mountain still have to say that the older you are, the higher the Taoism. New 10 the 4th becomes the 4th, and when the hard-working daughter-in-law becomes a mother-in-law, she will naturally have the right to look down on the next group of new 14ths. Many people in the Ascension realm who have become old and decayed in form and spirit often mistakenly think that cultivating the Tao is just that. Poor Taoists also experience such a bleak period when their Taoist minds retreated. Who can reach the Ascension realm? As a proud man at the beginning of his enlightenment and ascension, who doesn't have the heart to be brave and diligent. Unfortunately, as time goes by, his practice is hindered and he will inevitably become slack, and then he thinks that the path is hopeless and he is completely discouraged. However, there are a total of 15 realms of knowledge and cultivation, which are like 3 books. Upper, middle and lower. When you break through the nascent soul realm and enter the upper 5 realms, you think you are in the 3rd part of this book. When you reach the immortal realm, you will be shocked to find that you are in the 2nd part. Hearing this, Feng Shuatao continued, "What's even more terrifying is that I have entered the Ascension realm. I am afraid that I am in the 1st book." Lu Yen smiled and said, "By analogy, after the union, you will be afraid that your monastic career will be just a preface, right?" Master Hulong laughed heartily and just raised the wine bowl. "Everything is worse than having the cup in your hand and there are no worries outside the cup." Xiago echoed, "Sleep until you wake up naturally and sleep until the food in the world is ready." Cui Dongshan praised, "What a beautiful poem. It has no rhythm, but it has charm." Only Pei Qian did not squint, looked at his nose and heart and drank silently. The rest of the people subconsciously looked towards Qin Shanzhu, who was rumored to be extremely talented and famous for his poetry. Taking advantage of both Taoist Chunyang and Master Hulong being present, Feng Shuatao also felt that the atmosphere at the wine table was good, and the drunkenness was daring. Following the previous topic, he asked a more tacky question. The Ascension realm will definitely not be able to beat the 14th realm? As far as he knew, Liang had 2 sparring sessions with Zhen Invincible Yudo in Tianwai Tian of Qingming World. This is a battle between the Ascension realm sword cultivator and the 14th realm. The only spectators of the battle are demons from outside. Overseas in Nanbosu Island, Qin Chunan intercepted the wild Lu Cha. This was a life-and-death fight between a perfect and pure Confucian in the Ascension realm, carrying the sun and moon on his shoulders, and a newly promoted sword cultivator in the 14th realm. On the battlefield of the old dragon city in Aquarius continent, the true dragon king Zhu had a close fight with Fei Fei and Zhou Xian, who were on the throne of the wilderness. In the realm of Tuyue Mountain, the young hermit official and the culprit, the chief disciple of the savage ancestor, belonged to the struggle between 2 people from the 14th realm. It's just that neither of them are pure swordsmen in the true sense. Some results are reasonable. Some wins and losses are unexpected. Master Huolong laughed and said, "What does it mean to win? Is it a tie at a lower level or a defeat or a beheading?" Fellow Qingmi Daoists' wording must be more accurate, otherwise it will be difficult to make it clear. Feng Shuatao asked doubtfully, "Is it possible that a person in the Ascended Realm still has a chance to kill the 14th realm?" Master Fire Dragon twisted his beard and pondered for a moment. "Before this year there is no chance of winning. A difference of 1 realm is a world of difference. After this year there is no telling. I talked about this with my friends before and reached a consensus. When faced with the 14th realm in the Ascension realm, the former will win if he can escape without harming the Tao." Master Huolong was silent for a moment and said, "For example, Taoist Chunyang fellow, while walking on the road, I got into a dispute with a certain new 14er from a certain world. The reasoning didn't make sense, so I had to fight. Fellow Taoist Chunyang got into a real fight with him and there was a lot of trouble. Small odds." Lu Yen laughed dumbly and shook his head slowly. "This assumption cannot be taken seriously." Xiago smiled from ear to ear. Suppose Bai is also a pure sword cultivator. If the old blind man had refined 1 or 2 natal characters at the beginning, and if Zhou had secretly eaten 2 or 3 of the 14th realms, and if most of the 13th and 14th realm demons in the wild world had died, if the little master is not bound by rules. If the master of Bixiao Cave encounters a world where a toad does not drink water, the world will be peaceful for tens of millions of years. I have been promoted to the 14th realm and I have gathered more than 20 roads, large and small, connecting the sea and the land, and a sword energy as powerful as a blasphemy, haha. Master Huolong glanced at Bai Jing, a swordsman with a girlish appearance in an ermine hat. Can she really possess more than 20 profound Taoist traditions? Even if he had known for a long time that she had excellent qualifications and profound background. But when Bai Jing told the truth in person, Master Huolong was still a little surprised. Having seen the strong winds and waves, Master Huolong saw only a handful of Taoist geniuses, as far away as Wei Shi and as close as his left and right. Qin Pingon smiled and reminded from his heart, "What are you talking about? You can travel around the world without revealing your wealth." Xiago replied confidently, "Master of the Mountain, you don't know something. What I say and do now is a scheming person. It's very scary. This language is used to deceive the eyes and is used in the art of war. This is the 36 strategies to show the enemy's weakness." Qin Pingon was doubtful about this. It's hard to say whether the ancient sword cultivator Bai Jing had a city or not and how deep the city was. Just talking about Xia Zishi of Lolu Mountain, a character who was willing to give himself the nickname Guzi. Qin Pingon found a refer to ask, "How many of the Taoist practices practiced by Han Qies in Baidi City can catch your eye?" Xiago Qin laughed a few times and said vaguely, "I don't say bad things about fellow Taoists behind my back." The old man twisted his beard and thought for a moment. If we really care about the scene before the rain, it does make some sense, such as Ning Yao and the wild and magnificent scenery. As the co-masters of their respective worlds, their ascension realm was previously unique. Therefore even the 14th realm monks would never provoke them if they could not do so. Otherwise, even if the 14th realm defeated them in the long run, it will still lead to a lose-lose situation. After all, this move is almost an enemy of the entire world. Of course, the consequences are endless and the consequences are huge. The Tao consumes too much. In fact, at this level, there are also existences such as Leap Moon Peak and Savage Dial. The 5 worlds can be counted with one hand. The next ones are Taoist Chunyang and City Master Zheng. These people can do whatever they want to do. A little further behind are Zhao Tianshi and Yao Qing. They have already been blessed with good fortune and perfect merits. The matter of joining the Tao is really a matter of time. The next level down is Taoist friends Xia and strangers as well as Hao Su and others. The sword heart is pure. As a sword cultivator he has an innate advantage and has huge killing power, but the pass is more difficult to break. The scene after the rain this time is proof. There are several. As a sword cultivator has he reached a higher level. Further back there are those in the Ascension realm such as Wild Peach Pavilion who are good at fighting. There are more of them. As for further back there is nothing to talk about. These four kinds of cultivators are the powerful ones on the top of the mountain. Ascension facing the 14th realm, the first two levels are enough to protect oneself, and the latter two are still capable of fighting, but the specific outcome, whether it is victory or defeat or life and death, depends to a large extent. It is in the hands of the 14th realm. It depends on whether the 14th realm is willing to risk its life, whether the 14th realm is willing to die, and whether it is willing to trade the real life of the Tao for the other party's loss of Tao. During this period, there were a few special cases that were enough to make the 14th realm feel troublesome, such as one of Lu Ji's natal flying swords. The 14 realms that should be in an invincible position must carefully weigh the cost. Pei Qian was surprised because she did not expect that Master Huolong would place Mr. Xiego and Mr. Xiaomo after Zhao Tianshi and the others. The old master stroked his beard and smiled. As for the 14th realm, I have just entered the industry. I am young and it is not easy to talk nonsense. Why did Wu Shuangjiang work so hard and plan for a long time just to refine 4 imitation fairy swords before he was willing to start the troubled times and take the lead in rising up? It was Wu Shuangjiang who felt that his killing power in the 14th realm was lacking. Zheng Juzhong had a heated discussion with Yu Dou, who was visiting Baidi City. Zheng Juzhong is in the 14th realm with 1 person and 3 people, and Yu Dou is not in by Yujing, but Zheng Juzhong still loses. Master Huolong suddenly stood up and winked. Qin Pingon stood up silently and followed him. The old man walked up to the top of the ferry, held it up with both hands and asked with a smile, "Master Qin, how do you feel now after we parted ways on the island?" On the way to the mountain the wind blows from all directions. From nascent soul to jade pu, you need to pass the heart barrier and meet the inner demons. The key is to have a clear mind. From ascension to joining the Tao, the key lies in one's skill and whether it can fit in with the Tao of heaven and earth. When you reach the top of the mountain you are in a league of your own. At the wine table, Pei Qian asked quietly, "Senior brother, Master seems a little nervous after seeing the old man?" Cui Dongshan pretended to be stupid and said, "Is it an illusion?" The old man helped give an explanation. "Thousands of threads, mixed feelings and mixed flavors?" Qin Pingon said honestly, "I can't tell clearly for a while." The old man looked up at the sky and said with a smile, "If you want to return the world to the world you have to be alone? Don't be in a hurry, think about it slowly." Qin Pingon was lying on the railing, lost in thought. With the bright moon in the sky, the old man pointed to the sky and said something that seemed like nonsense. "If I remember correctly, there were 4 gates in the ancient heaven." Qin Pingon seemed to have come to his senses and gave a concise explanation. "Come out of the mountain." The old man hummed and nodded slightly. "It's interesting. The heart and moon are full tonight." Sword of Coming Chapter 1130. The fastest update of Jianlai. Lu Yen was the first to say goodbye and Qin Pingon wished this Chunyang master, who is known as the #1 golden elixir, good luck in his experience. Master Qin Shan also said some auspicious words, hoping that the senior Taoist heart would be as perfect as the 15th month. Feng Shuetao was puzzled. It is common sense that the moon waxes and wanes. Logically speaking, when it is full it loses. Is this a good saying? Cui Dongshan rolled his eyes and could only explain to the ignorant brother Feng from his heart. As the saying goes, the moon on the 15th day is 16 round. Feng Shuetao was speechless for a moment. Shan Juchen did have unique knowledge in speaking. Qin Pingon went to meet Xing Yun and Lu Shui, 2 local sword cultivators from the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and chatted about the customs of the wild side. Cui Dongshan didn't have a long but. He immediately pulled Feng Shuetao off the Tongyin ferry and asked this ascended realm man if he was interested in finding a job with the Qingping sword sect. He regarded it as doing his brother a favor. Since his feelings were it's time to go out and drink, so let's not talk about money so as not to hurt the brotherhood. Feng Shuetao had already suffered a big loss from Jiang Shangzhen, but he just refused to evade. Besides, he really didn't feel that he and Chui sect leader were from the same family. On the other side, walking in the brightly lit streets and alleys, the boy in white threw his sleeves into a crackling sound. Pei Qian cleared the wine table and went back to his room to practice walking in silence. Master Huolong found the girl in the mink hat who was alone, and asked straight to the point with a smile. May I ask fellow Taoist Bai Jing, what kind of scenery does it look like when you look at the sky and the earth? Xiago curled his lips. Nothing fancy. Master Huolong was stunned for a moment before he remembered that this language seemed to be the dialect of the small town in Chenpingan. He was silent for a moment and said with a smile, only those who have met before are qualified to say such things. Xiago stretched out his hands and tugged Diao Mao. You all think that my aptitude for cultivating is very good. In fact, I think it's just average and not top-notch. I just took a huge advantage. I was born early and I was lucky enough to meet a lot of old people. The characters on page seem to be Sravakas, in the narrow sense according to Buddhism? Is that right? I have roughly calculated that I have met, asked for advice in person, discussed with each other and lost in fights. There are almost 100 of them. Who are these ancient Taoist priests? If you put any of these ancient Taoist priests in today's world, wouldn't they be top-notch figures? In the past, I always ignored these things and just thought they were ordinary. When I came here, I often wandered at the foot of the mountain. I saw the Taoist priests again and I was depressed. Live or die to clear up the confusion I will. Master Huolong waited patiently for the next sentence. Xiago rubbed his red cheeks and held it in for a long time before giving an explanation. I want to cry. When Master Huolong heard this, he suddenly laughed heartily, expressed his deep agreement and even said a few good words. Xiago had a melancholy look on his face. Mr. Zhu is a critical friend. He criticized me very rudely, saying that I was born at the right time and have gone through many hardships to practice Taoism. I am lucky and always have near misses. I seem to be taking my time. I am slowly accumulating Tao power, but I don't know my true intention. When my realm is high, I retreat from the Taoist mind. Therefore, I only realize small fruits, which is still far from being mature. So I went out to relax and take a trip. Xuandishan, the old blind man's opinion of me is different from Mr. Zhu's. Not much. Master Huolong laughed dumbly. Mr. Zhu? Zhou Xian, a martial artist from Lotus Flower Blessed Land? It is true that he is a rare and wonderful person, but on Xiago's side Zhou Xian will never age no matter what, right? Xiago glanced at the old man and said, in my eyes, you are also very old. Master Huolong stroked his beard and smiled. He said this in a very down-to-earth manner which made people feel happy after listening to it. Xiago regards Feng Xuetao, whose Taoist name is Qingmi, as a junior among the juniors. Even Lu Yan, whose Taoist name is Chunyang, is at most a peer on the path of cultivation, and they can just call each other Taoist friends. However, the old cook in his poor family and the old man next to him do have a strange ability that makes people think that they are the kind of elders they think of. What they say is teaching, and they are telling you a few words of wisdom from people who have experienced it. In this matter, even Shan Zhuchen, who likes to be reasonable, seems to be a bit unreasonable. Master Huolong smiled and said, the Sunset Landing was once the private domain of fellow Taoist, causing the Golden Crow to sleep soundly for thousands of years. It happened to be in Aquarius continent. Fellow Taoist is so reasonable and willing to give in, which is quite unexpected. If the rumors on the mountain are correct, it seems that Bai Jing leased this dojo to the Dali imperial court. Xiago curled his lips. First of all, the powerful dragon will not overwhelm the local snake, and besides, our mountain master is about to become the grand master of the Great Li Kingdom. Why don't one family speak the same language as the other? But she quickly added, if I fall into the wild world, it depends on whether I can speak well or not. No one can be the lobbyist, not even Mr. Bai. Master Huolong nodded and said, principal Taoists like to hear honest words from honest people. Even Jiang Shangzhen was very curious about Xiago's Taoist roots, and privately asked Chen Pingon whether it was possible that Miss Xia was from the Shinto. This kind of speculation is easy to understand. After all, Bai Jing's dojo is well known on the top of the mountain. During a high-ranking day, she once carved and opened up a fire palace as a shelter. However, according to the inside story leaked by Qing Tong, Bai Jing's origin is indeed a demon clan on the earth, not a member of the ancient heaven. Because of Xiao Mo's relationship, Xiago and Qin Pingon chatted about the past in a more casual manner. She did not deny that she initially wanted to take the better-born son as her own, and then tried to learn from the ancient world. One of the 10 richest people, Lan Qi, a female cultivator, refined this great son into her natal object. However, she soon discovered that the great son actually gave birth to spiritual wisdom, and the avenue manifested into a golden crow. Bai Jing changed his original intention and protected the path for her. So when Xiego proposed to go to Haoran world, Bai Zhe didn't stop him even though he knew that Man Huang would lose some of his top combat power. This was a very important reason. It's not just as simple as Xiego going to find Xiaomo. According to the rules of the wilderness, when it comes to the Taoist's great opportunity, all calculations of interests must make way for it. What's more, Bai Jing is also a candidate sword cultivator in the 14th realm who Bai Zhe has high hopes for. Master Huolong smiled and said, really speaking, Pin Dao fellow Taoist Bai Jing and Master Chunyang are somewhat related to each other in the lineage of Taoism. It is very appropriate to say fellow Taoist. Xiego nodded vigorously. In the future, the three of us will often visit each other. If we encounter a hard nail that our hands, we will say hello to each other and keep a cloud-piercing arrow to meet us with thousands of troops, haha. Master Huolong touched his palm and said with a smile, it's easy to talk. In the vast void outside the sky, there are countless big suns floating in the sky, and each big sun is like a fairy, leading to the palace that was praised as the Imperial Palace by later Taoists. 1 Danshao Jiangke Huyang Palace. Lu Yan, a real person from Chunyang, was the most famous person in history. He had taught fire techniques many times in this ancient ruins. Most of the people here who listened to the teachings humbly were noble ancient dragons. Master Huolong asked suddenly, it seems that fellow Taoist Bai Jing is very interested in Pei Qian? Xiego smiled awkwardly, creating gangs in the mountains is just like children playing house just for fun. Under the instigation of the white-haired boy, they all recognized Guizhujiu as the leader of the alliance, and established their own mountain with Pei Qian and his gang. Master Huolong smiled. Oh? Xiaogugan smiled and said, Master Huolong changed the subject. I wonder who was the first to use sweetness to describe a sweet dream, it's amazing. Xiego understood she had been sleeping for thousands of years, and Huolong Zhenren had always moved the world with his sleep. In this complicated world, meeting a few people with simple ideas is like meeting a good drinker and fine wine. Xiego grinned and said, Old master, if we met on the road 10,000 years ago, we would definitely become good friends. Master Huolong twisted his beard and said, same feeling. Xiego said, what is the old man going to do next? Master Huolong smiled and said, return to the wilderness, find a few people who can really fight and learn the Taoism from each other. Because Qin Pingan and Xiego did not deliberately hide their tracks when they boarded the ship, the ears and eyes installed by Yunyan State on Yulindu did not dare to take it lightly and immediately informed the court. No matter how small the territory of Yunyan country is, there are still a handful of local Qi practitioners. In the corridor on the top floor of a private house on the shore of the ferry, there is a group of boys and girls looking at the Tongyin ferry in the distance. They have nothing to do on weekdays. They just stare at the movements of the entire Yulindu. They are not afraid of having nothing to do, but they are afraid that the foreign immortal master will have a dispute with the local family. I heard that the Minister of Rites is on tenterhooks every day, going to the temple to burn fragrant. Fortunately, so far there has not been any uncontrollable mess in the Jiangyi area. The emperor and a large group of royal relatives are increasingly looking forward to having someone come here as a guest and meet him. But it's fun to say that first, His Majesty the Emperor of Yunyan Kingdom, when a golden elixir comes to the capital, he will personally host a banquet to entertain him, and then Yuanying will do it. The golden elixir is not enough, and then it becomes the upper 5. Jade Pu, who was in the same realm, is now more even. When he heard that there was an immortal coming, His Majesty the Emperor seemed not to be interested. After all, he had even met the Ascension realm named Qingmi. There was a young man with thick eyebrows and big eyes sitting cross-legged, sword across his knees, frowning and asking, is it him? Next to her was a slender girl with cold eyebrows. She looked up at the fairy and reassured, it's hard to say. They had received a confidential message from the Ministry of Justice of the Imperial Court before. The head of the Qingping sword sect came to Tongyi's Hao in person, and Mi Dajiangxian soon arrived. He made a great contribution and found those few remnants of the wild monster clan who killed innocent people indiscriminately, And the turmoil of Dadu was the excavation can finally proceed smoothly. Without this key clue, none of them would have connected the man in blue shirt next to the girl in the mink hat with the legendary young hidden official. The young man is the only local sword cultivator in Yunyan country, and it is inevitable that he is a little complacent in his spiritual state of mind. Now that his horizons have opened up, he feels that the pressure has increased sharply, and he has become taciturn on weekdays. The streets of the capital were full of strange people and strangers who once thought that the earthly immortal they pursued their whole life was nothing. This made the young swordsman seem to be practicing silent meditation recently. If Tongyi's Hao was still the same Tongyi's Hao a few decades ago with his Taoist qualifications and sword cultivator status, if nothing else happened he should have gone to a certain sect to further his studies. The young man was in a gloomy mood and said in a low voice, "Those who are accomplished monks passing by our Yunyan country, will it be like passing by an ant nest for people like them?" In the past, Tongyi's Hao had little information, and the chi refiners often had their eyes high above their heads and were not interested in the outside world at all. Now that things have changed, they can no longer help but to keep their doors closed and feel arrogant. The girl was stunned when she heard this and turned her gaze away from the Yulin fairy and said softly, "Zhong Chui, whether it is those sects from other places, or the land gods who travel here under aliases, in the face of these unattainable behemoths, we just give it a wide berth." The young man named Zhong Chui murmured, "It's easy to ask the gods but hard to send them away." Because he didn't quite believe that the Qingping sword sect was a mountain sect that opened a charity hall. Are there really such people in the world who care so much about the quality of the world outside themselves? I am afraid that one day the Qingping sword sect will gain a firm foothold in Tongye continent, and all the countries along the coast of Dadu will become puppets of that fairy palace. A martial artist climbed over the wall to the top floor and bought a jar of barley wine from a time-honored shop. He climbed over the railing. The middle-aged martial artist's face was somewhat similar to that of the young man in the corridor. The girl covered her mouth and smiled sweetly. "Uncle Zhong, you drove away another illegal cruise ship. I saw it. He was very heroic." The man laughed and said, "Girl Kai, not only that, I also met two strangers on Tongjian's boat and made an appointment to drink." A tall young man who was taking a nap against the wall quickly asked, "It's not the man in the green shirt, is it? Did he tell you his identity? Is his surname Chen?" The man boasted and didn't make any drafts. He said seriously, "We just want to have a drink together. We don't need to know our names." Over on the roof, a young man in white was lying with his legs crossed. Feng Shuetao was speechless. He came here to drink the northwest wind and listen to a few children complaining. What was the meaning of it? The young man said regretfully, "It's a pity. If it were really that person and we got involved again, Uncle Zhong, you would be rich." The man said with a smile, "Young people should not always think that they will be successful if they meet a noble person." After slapping the young man on the forehead, the man joked, "You brat, do you know that in the eyes of those rich and powerful nobles, you guys have prices stuck on your foreheads?" On the other side of the roof, Feng Shuetao smiled and said, "That's a bit too much to say." Cui Dongshan, who rested his head on the back of his hand, swayed his legs and said, "He is a well-informed and reasonable person." Feng Shuetao asked, "Who does Cui Zongzhu have in mind to win over?" The Qingping sword sect is different from the Luopa mountain. The latter announced that it would be closed for 20 years and clearly did not want to increase its momentum. On the other hand, Cui Dongshan of the Xia sect has been recruiting troops. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "Brother Feng, don't always think of me as snobbish. I just enjoy the moon with like-minded friends." Cui Dongshan explained, "I am just a transitional sect master. I only need to be responsible for laying a good foundation and building a good relationship. It's a good framework, but some gaps are deliberately left so you don't have to worry about making up the numbers. Qingping sword sect will definitely hand it over to junior brother Chao in the future. At hand, when Chao Qinglang takes over, he will have something to do, at least he won't have to tie his hands and follow suit." Feng Shuetao nodded. If Qingping sword sect is too Xia's style, Chao Qinglang will be in trouble. Cui Dongshan hummed, "That's a bit harsh to say." Feng Shuetao was helpless. On the other side of the corridor, although they felt that what the man said was reasonable, they were always unconvinced. Yesterday, today and tomorrow the moon waxes and wanes and the young people are young. There is no night ban in the capital. Young people with money and energy in their pockets, as well as spiritual practitioners who are full of energy, are often night owls. Many shops temporarily hire assistants to take care of the shop for the sake of business, which means they can earn $2 a day, so why not do it? A pair of Daoist monks who became a couple halfway through also came to the capital of Yunyan Kingdom. The man had a face as white as a sheet of paper and a fierce appearance. He was accompanied by a fair-skinned woman with an exquisite figure. They were just hanging out and gaining insights. It's hard to say whether you can travel all over the world if you have reason, but you can indeed travel all over the world if you have money. They had received a large amount of windfall, and their original intention of living under someone else's roof had faded away, so they did not go to the mountain god's mansion to seek a living. They were Fan Tong and Xianxia. Along the way they also heard about several major events far away. For example, a certain great swordsman surnamed Mi from the Sword Qi Great Wall took action and uncovered those who were making trouble and smashing talismans. Monster beasts. Another example is Yugui Zong Duo has a heaven-reaching figure to worship, named Qingmi, and old in the Ascension realm. Naturally, Fan Tong and Xianxia didn't know that the culprits who almost stopped the Dadu excavation work were the group of young men and women they met in the dilapidated temple. As for the swordsman named Mi and who he was, Fan Tong asked. It was probably because others saw that he did not seem to be a kind person, so they ignored him at all. Fan Tong really wanted to find an Xinjia inn or shop on Yulindu, and ask the Immortal Master if he recognized a person named Qin Pingon, or buy a few Shandy newspapers to see if there was any chance. Really found that name. In the end, the woman gave up the idea by saying, "You have money?" Fan Tong actually did have private money, but he didn't need to reveal it out of curiosity. They stayed in an ordinary inn in the capital. When I was walking on the shore of the ferry earlier, I saw a moored ferry. It was the largest ferry. There were always some young and beautiful fairies pointing at it. The crowd of Ying Yen Yen and all the fairies with genealogies were gathered together. Fan Tong, a hot-blooded old man, of course failed to keep his eyes open, so he was pinched and pinched again and again by the angry woman. The pain makes the man sweat, the pain returns it hurts, and taking care of it are two different things. Fan Tong believed that Master Qin would be in a similar situation if he traveled with them. I just don't know if Master Qin Xian, who claims to be the Sword Immortal, would be frightened if he met me, the Sword Immortal, who is being talked about a lot now, and had the chance to have a few words face to face. Tonight the couple went out of the city again and came to Yulindu to eat out in a restaurant. This kind of expense was numerous, and they had saved a few snow coins before. In the past, women liked to visit all kinds of rouge and gouache shops, but here it became even more exaggerated. Fan Tong was surprised. He picked and picked but didn't buy. How could she be happy? Xianxia chose a fly restaurant and planned to eat hot pot. As soon as Fan Tong sat down, the boss began to worry about whether the couple would be freeloaders, but then he thought again, the government is so tough now, isn't it? The people at the next table were people who came down from the mountain. Although they didn't use their innermost words, the content of their conversation was all about the fairy family. However, Fan Tong knew very well that the reason for this was because they were accompanied by several ordinary women with heavy makeup and jewels. When those women saw Fan Tong, who looked like a wanted criminal, they felt a little disdainful. Looking at Xianxia next to the fierce man, their eyes had a meaning that only women could understand. Xianxia looked proud. "I am now a decent woman. What about you? You can make money by going to bed, right?" Fan Tong didn't know that there was an undercurrent surging here, and there was more interest in the slightly suspicious chat content of those genealogy monks. They were explaining some of the inside stories of the Immortal family to the women, saying that the attire of the Qi refiners in the mountains can be divided into 3, 6, or 9 grades. The first type is those who can tame immortal birds and beasts as mounts, either because they have good luck, or it means that he has a strong enough background and is rewarded by his master and elders. The second type is an expensive talisman boat. This kind of fairy treasure cannot be afforded casually. The third type is even more exaggerated. You can have a Liaotian is always eating the private fairy with fairy money. Xianxia tapped the man next to her with her elbow and raised her eyebrows. Fan Tong laughed and said that these 3 kinds of immortal styles were beyond her reach, and she had to find a good sleeping position in her dreams. All the women looked directly at a young man who drank slowly. He was the only one at the table without a female companion. The eloquent man changed the subject and said that Mr. Hong has a talisman treasure boat from the Patriarch Hall to congratulate him on entering the cave realm. The young man surnamed Hong smiled lightly, took a sip of his drink, and said that his meager Taoist skills were nothing at all. Compared with a true Taoist genius, he was far behind. The more self-effacing he is, the hotter the eyes of the women at the same table become. The man who was willing to serve as a helper for the man named Hong continued, "The most outrageous thing is, of course, that I have a private ferry." While eating hot pot, Xianxia secretly rolled her eyes from time to time. Fan Tong just felt that this barley tasted soft and not strong enough. At this moment, out of the corner of her eye, the woman spotted a familiar figure on the other side of the door. She quickly stood up and saw that the man next to her was still devouring his food, so she kicked her. Fan Tong raised his head blankly and the man suddenly smiled brightly. He was reunited with Master Xian here. Qin Pingon sat on the bench opposite them with a smile. "Shamelessly, let's eat and drink together. You treat me, I'll pay the bill." Fan Tong wiped his mouth. After all, he was a fastidious person who had never read a book. "This is so embarrassing." Xianxia smiled charmingly and said, "Why are we so polite to Master Xian?" Fan Tong plucked up the courage and asked, "Master Xian, I would like to ask, which profession do you belong to?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Xing will be the #1 scholar." Fan Tong is shy. The woman couldn't help laughing. She actually wanted to pick up food for Qin Pingon and help scald the food in the hot pot, but she hesitated and decided not to do it. Unpleasant. A pair of bowls and chopsticks were placed on the table and Qin Pingon didn't say much. He just buried his head in eating. The old rule is that hot pot is all about wine. "I have everything in the world." Just when they heard the name Master Qin, the table next to him glanced at the man in green shirt, but they just passed him by at a glance. Fan Tong lowered his voice and asked, "What is Master Qin doing here?" Qin Pingon picked up the wine bowl, clinked it with the couple and drank it all in one gulp. Qin Pingon first took out a few pieces of tripe from the pot with a spoon, and put them on the couple's plates respectively. Then he explained with a smile, "I happen to have an acquaintance here busy with some small things." Fan Tong said oh but didn't take it seriously. The woman stared blankly at the tripe on the plate. When she came to her senses, she turned around and told the boss to buy another pound of barley wine. In the alley outside, His Majesty the Emperor of Yunyan Kingdom, who had hurried out of the palace for a private visit incognito, stood at the corner of the wall patiently, holding his breath and concentrating. On the other side of the Tongyin ferry, Xiago had her hands on her hips, feeling proud. She was even more looking forward to Xiaomo's return home. When the owner of the mountain said that he was going to meet two friends, Xiago asked him to wait for a moment and said that he had something to ask for and that he would be involved in learning. When it comes to studying, Qin Pingon has always believed that a good memory is worse than a bad pen since he was a boy. Along the way, he has been describing various landscapes, urban customs and architectural construction methods in manuscripts. Perhaps because of being infected by Master Qin or maybe just looking for some fun, the girl in the mink hat would follow suit. During a break along the way, she would take out a booklet, turn her back to Qin Pingon and often write and draw. Qin Pingon never asked about this matter, but occasionally saw Xiago scratching his ears and cheeks there, which he found interesting. If it were a spiritual practice, Xiago would definitely not be so entangled. At that time, Xiago rubbed his mink hat, showing a rare shy look, and asked tentatively, "Mountain Master, I heard that you have the habit of writing landscape travel notes?" Qin Pingon suddenly became wary. He couldn't hide something on the hilltop of his home, so he led an army instead. "Speak directly if you have something to say, don't beat around the bush, don't imitate Tui Dongshan," Xiago said in a low voice. "Ha, isn't it because I have seen the wise and thought of them all? I have traveled through great rivers and mountains and I just want to record them so that I can talk to Xiaomo. Hey, isn't there a saying in the book that it's called being on the scene, describing the state of things, describing the scene and making it lifelike, so I thought I'd ask the mountain master to help polish it up." Like the old blind man who had studied so much but couldn't refine a single natal character. No wonder they show extra favor to our mountain master. Qin Pingon was a little confused and said oh. He became interested as soon as he heard this. "Can you bring me the manuscript to take a look at?" Xiago took out a booklet from his sleeve, held it up with both hands and raised it above his head. "Show your ugliness, show your ugliness." Qin Pingon took the booklet and opened it. The characters were quite large and could not be written on a single page. It was good that he could avoid pretending to read carefully. On such and such a day I left a certain city. I didn't know how many miles I walked, but I saw a high mountain. It was really high. When I reached the top of the mountain, when I looked at the town, I felt it was so small. Such a large sea of clouds, snow white like cotton. Beside a certain temple there is a tree, I don't know what it is called. It looks like it is really not young and it is about to become a spirit. One day I passed by a dilapidated inn and found several limericks written on the wall. They are transcribed as follows. Xiego asked softly, "Mountain Master, how do you feel after seeing it?" Qin Pingon looked calm, but his thoughts were changing rapidly and he finally managed to say, "The writing is relatively simple." I wanted to add a crude and cute statement, but I really couldn't say it. It was too unconscionable. I couldn't just tell lies just to avoid pouring cold water on Xiego and discourage her from writing and speaking. Xiego nodded to himself and said, "Sure enough, the writer is like a person. Even if he crushes the pen barrel, he still can't fiddle with those fancy contents." Qin Pingon ignored these words and asked, "Why is the article so full of such and such a day and such a place?" Xiego widened his eyes and said, "Do you need to write down the date and location one by one? I don't want to make money from this engraving, so I just want to write it concisely and only the key points." Qin Pingon tried his best to keep smiling. "The important points are all important." Xiego asked tentatively, "There is still room for improvement, right?" Qin Pingon had no choice but to sit on the floor, take out a pen and paper from his bag and help polish the text on the spot. "I'll make some slight modifications. Do you have any objections?" Xiego smiled and said, "Just write whatever you want. The only purpose is for the Mountain Master to write about me in this trip as well as possible." She squatted aside and saw that the Mountain Master only thought about it for a moment, and then started writing quickly, starting with the phrase, "I have traveled a lot." When the girl in the mink hat saw this, she nodded gently, which won my heart. The main reason is that the content is also very simple. It seems that the talents of the Mountain Master and I are equally matched, so there is no need to pay for editing. On the second day of the Lunar New Year, I went down the mountain with my friends holding a bamboo hat and a bamboo hat, stepping on straw sandals, asking questions with a strong heart, misty clouds and water, and walking freely. 20 miles past the boundary of Qingping Prefecture, the boundary monuments beside the road collapsed, and the mountains and rivers of the continent collapsed. In the past 20 years, floods, droughts, locust plagues, and wars in various countries have occurred one after another. The lives of the people at the foot of the mountain are like grass and grass, and it is difficult to say that there is peace in the mountains. More than 20 years have passed by in an instant like rocks, fire, and lightning. How dare we not cherish Taoism and accumulate Taoism power? The people's livelihood in Fuzhong City is in decline, the streets are deserted, and the people walking on the streets are many and varied. 10 miles out of the city they stop at a small post. For 30 miles I walked along the shore of the lake, surrounded by willows. I walked in the green shade, crossed the border ridge, and climbed the mountain along the Shinto road. The Taoist temple in the mountain was in ruins. I went inside and used the stove to light a fire. After dinner I climbed to the top and looked out. I saw the vast lake and the vast ocean. Qingping Mansion was there. In the eyes, the wind suddenly surged and disappeared. Looking back on those days, traveling was very difficult and we often couldn't see the fireworks of the world. It was a common thing to see wolves, tigers and leopards, strange birds and beasts, and terrifying mountain spirits and water monsters. On the early morning of the third day of the lunar month, I hiked down the mountain for more than 100 miles. I stopped at Yangjiapu for a short rest and bought dry food. I spent 8 cents of my money. After crossing the Zhou Xian bridge, it rained heavily and the road was muddy. After walking for 15 miles I arrived at Dum Beach. When the rain stopped and the sky cleared, I was traveling by boat at night. The passengers in the boat liked to talk about ghosts and strange things, but they didn't know that the boatman holding the mugwort was the person transformed by Hebo. After getting off the boat and traveling by land for 80 miles, we reached the Huanghuolong mountain. There were laurel trees along the road. Unfortunately, we were not here in autumn. We met several guests returning from paying incense to the mountain. There was no main peak on the mountain here and each one was respected. I went to the top of the mountain to meditate for a night. I saw the red sun rising into the sky and the river like a belt, which made me feel broad-minded. On the 5th day of the lunar month, I went to Liuhe town and was extorted 20 taels of silver by a local man pretending to be a soldier. 70 miles away I saw a mountain. The mountain was majestic and undisturbed. I walked with my friends along the stream in the mountain, and there were countless fish swimming in the water. There is a careful halfway up the mountain. From then on the only way to climb is the bird path. It is extremely steep and steep. The steps are carved into the wall and wind up. There is almost no place to stand, so you can only walk facing the wall. On the way, I saw an ancient pine tree with an old trunk like an umbrella, and a group of monkeys jumping among the branches and leaves. Above the top is a flat land with a lake in the middle and several huts beside the reed swamps. They are all people practicing Taoism. Although their expressions are dull and their bodies are withered, their eyes are bright and shining. He asked him about it and talked about the immortals, Buddhas, real people, miracles in the mountain in great detail, and decided to compile a mountain chronicle. With the help of the moonlight, looking at the scenery from the cliff, I realized that the whole body of the Dharma King was revealed in the mountains, rivers and land. On the 7th day of the lunar month, Tianji traveled quickly and entered the mountains again. In ancient times, there was the study place of the founding emperor, and it has always been a hidden place for high spiritual beings. On the mountainside, the climate is like winter and many beautiful and historic sites are buried in the snow, which is a pity that they cannot be seen. On the 9th day of the lunar month, I passed the battlefield site and saw a Taoist man with a high crown on a hillside, sitting on a futon with his eyes closed. There were 2 white streaks on his nose, connected with the clouds and mist. The wind was turbulent and still condensed. Not daring to disturb him, he stopped 20 steps away. The Taoist opened his eyes and spoke actively, speaking loudly again and again. The Taoist has a kind heart, and when he was leaving he repeatedly warned us Taoists that when we see desires we must stay away like weeds and we must avoid fire when it comes. Immortals are no different from ordinary people. If you know your mistakes you can correct them. If you are sick and sweat you can gradually recover. You must be devoted to the Tao, practice hard and never be distracted by fame and fortune. Remember. On the 12th day the sun was scorching like a scorching summer. I went to the mountains to escape the heat. The mountains were densely green with bamboos and cypresses, which shaded the sky. On the way, I heard the sound of evening drums in the distance and I knew there was a temple in it. An ancient temple was built by decree of the previous dynasty, but the incense has faded. There are 2 monks in the temple, both of whom look like arhats and have high moral standards. The products in the mountains are barren and life is cold and hard, so food depends on raising money from the mountains. The 2 monks were good at talking about the purity of Zen, and they said that among the final Dharma, there is only one pure land, which is extremely stable and extremely fast. On the 15th, on the official road, I met more than 100 refugees migrating to other places. They traveled together for more than 100 miles and parted ways when they met a porridge shop. 20 miles away the sky was dark and the day was like night. I was having lunch at a liquor store on the border of 2 counties. I met a knight with a sword in the shop. He was tall and powerful. He invited his tablemates to drink. He reminded me that there are so many thieves on the road nowadays. If it doesn't stop you need to take a detour. The knight-errant claims that he is at home all over the world and he travels far away with a thin and lame old horse, and his figure is lost. After sighing when I was paying the bill, I found out that the ranger pretended to be a friend and took the opportunity to get away on credit. I and my friend just looked at each other and smiled, not taking it seriously. On the 16th, when it was dark, we crossed the border and arrived at other counties and cities. The markets were prosperous, densely populated and rich in products. It was completely different from what we had seen before. I stayed at the Epiphyllum temple in the city. The master of the temple was hospitable to the guests. He personally led the homage to the various temples and spoke sincerely. He said that delusion is like redding in the sea, and desire is like a fire starting a prairie fire. Taoists like us must not ignore this principle and say a few words. Words are the easiest to say and the hardest to do. Staying in the city for 1 day, and on the 18th day I continued to travel far and wide, stopping and walking through mountains and rivers. At the foot of an unknown mountain, I met 3 young people who swore that they would never return to their hometown until they became immortals. Later I saw a tadpole stele with numerous stone carvings and blurry inscriptions, so I stopped to copy it. Monk Yunshui wrote an inscription here, feeling ashamed that he would never see him again in this life. There are rocks standing abruptly like an old monk on the top of the mountain. There was a hut in ancient times, but now there is no grass. Only the historic well remains and there are still green leek bushes beside it. A single peak stands out from the vast sea of clouds, the mainstay as if the mountains are moving but the clouds are motionless. After Pei Qian finished walking, he walked out of the house. Under the clear moonlight, he saw the Xia dog still standing at the bow of the boat, minding his own business and enjoying himself secretly. Xiago looked back at the young woman and made a face at the latter. Pei Qian didn't take it seriously, just get used to it. Xiago crept up to her, raised his hand to drink and asked with a smile, Pei Qian, let's talk while drinking? There are some things that it's time for you to know. Pei Qian seemed to be deliberately evading the important points, with a puzzled look on his face. Didn't we drink just now? Mountain Master Xiago sighed. It's the second stall. Pei Qian shook his head. No need. If Xiago wanted to say anything else, Pei Qian had already turned around and walked towards his house. Xiago hesitated to speak, but in the end he did not say anything to persuade him to stay. She jumped onto the railing, swung her feet and started talking to herself,